Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Medieval Mythbusting with the creative Contessa and the Mason from King Henry VIII's Royal Court. We are going to be talking about some of the buzz today in the medieval world while I get dressed and while I will be working on new garments for this upcoming 2-week living history event I'll be attending from July into August. I desperately need a whole bunch of new clothes, so I've just been sewing all day, every day. So today you're going to get to see me working on underwear. So first we'll start by getting dressed, and while I get dressed, Mason, it's lovely to have you back. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm glad to join. It's been a minute.
Okay, well, one of the things we're going to be discussing today, everyone, is the death of Robin Hood, because that is the newest thing that is out in the cinema world. It's the newest view into the medieval world for the average person, and unfortunately, I'm very disappointed with the clothing and the costuming in the death of Robin Hood. It's just, people ask me, well, what does it matter? They say, what does it matter how people dress in these movies? Well, why it matters? Why the authenticity of clothing and setting and depiction matters to me is because for most people in the world, their only exposure to medieval history is going to be Hollywood. That's going to be it. That's it. They will not have probably had much medieval history in school. They will not have probably learned any real accurate medieval history in school, honestly. And so the only exposure they're going to have is through Hollywood and its depiction. And Death of Robin Hood is an excellent movie from the perspective of the acting, the storytelling. It's cinematically very interesting, but it's got zero to do with the Middle Ages. Almost nothing to do with the Middle Ages in terms of how it depicts medieval people, medieval clothing, medieval material culture. It completely misses the mark. And we fall once more into the usual tropes, unfortunately. It's very frustrating. Audio is tinny. The audio is tinny. Great. Okay, everyone. I love my life. Hold on a minute.
Your voice is like.
That's great. We might. Okay. Hold on. Let's do the usual thing you do when things don't work.
Oh, this is a mess. Ooh.
Okay. Okay, that may or may not have helped. We'll see. Okay. How did that fix the tinny audio or not?
It did. I can hear you better now. Your audio's fixed.
Yeah. Okay. Everyone, let me know if the audio if that fixed the audio. If not, I can go one more level of extreme restart. Alas. Oh, Twitchy, it's lovely to see you again. It's been so rare. Okay, so what we were discussing before the audio failure was the death of Robin Hood, right? And the movie is getting rave critical reviews, and it should. It's a good bit of storytelling, and the acting is of course excellent. Judy Comey and Hugh Jackman. I mean, what else were we going to expect? But please don't look at this movie in any way as a depiction of medieval clothing.
or medieval material culture or medieval hairstyles or medieval headdresses or anything regarding medieval material culture. It just isn't. It is unfortunately the usual tropes of the horrible tropes of clothing and, you know, leather and drab and raggedy and, you know, this is supposed to be, and here's the problem with the new Robin Hood movie, Death of Robin Hood, is they set it in a year. It's supposed to be 1246, England, not a fantasy land, not a timeless place. They give it a year, they give it a place. That's a historical time and place. And so we know exactly how people dressed back then. We have extant garments from the 13th century. We know how people dressed. There is no mystery to it. No mystery at all. It's not like doing a movie set in 5000 BC where there's lots of mystery. This is a very well researched and reconstructed era. So there's just no excuse for it except for directors' stylistic choices, which really frustrate me. And then, of course, you also have the catering to what the audience expects. I read an interview recently with someone who, a director who said, no, a historian actually, who said, if Hollywood actually accurately depicted the way medieval people dressed with colors and not being dirty and not being dark and horribly depressing, then no one would believe it. The audience wouldn't believe it. The audience would say, that's not realistic. And that's really frustrating. That is so frustrating. So, yeah. Mason, have you had a chance to take a look at any of the stills? Oh, you might have to turn, you're getting feedback. You might have to turn your volume down. Did you not have your headset?
I do. I think I may have to use a different device. Lynn said my audio keeps cutting in and out.
Yeah.
So I have set up, but I may have to switch my device. But
drink, everyone. Am I into witchcraft? Absolutely not. This is not how witches dress in any era in particular. No. The medieval era is not particularly known for witchcraft, just in case anyone was wondering. That's a myth. That's a myth. No, I am not into witchcraft. Drink, everyone. Yes. So yeah. So I would just say, do not look. Don't go and enjoy the Robin Hood movie, but there's nothing there on which you should be modeling your medieval kit. Nothing that I saw anyway. There's a lot of furs being worn, just draped over shoulders, and some really great fantasy clothes that would look fantastic in something like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. Oh crap, I got distracted and didn't actually put my braids away. Game of Thrones, but sadly not in the Middle Ages, not in Europe. Yeah. So yeah. So today, I'm going to be working on some new medieval underwear for myself, and I will then be also discussing some of the comments I've been getting under recent videos that need addressing that talk about medieval material culture and major misconceptions about our medieval ancestors. And yeah, hopefully Mason will be Mason is joining us again. It's been a while since we've had Mason on. Hopefully he will be getting his headset set up so he can actually be heard. Yeah. So, is anyone out there working on any projects? I have been sewing like a fiend. I've been working on underwear pretty much uniquely, but I have also cut out a couple of new kirtles. For anyone who's wondering, this is a kirtle. This is a kirtle. So I'm currently dressed in what I call my 15th century noblewoman Lululemon. This is really technically underwear for noblewomen. I've got my smock on, which is the linen layer that goes against the skin. And then over top of that, we have the kirtle, which this is a 15th century style kirtle, and it just laces up, right? And, Mason's back. And then we have, Mason never left though. Okay. Yeah.
I just want to check. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. you are a black field, I think.
Great.
Yeah, Twitchy. So the death of Robin Hood. So the lack of veils for the prioress made me cry. Yeah, I have to say, yeah, it is. It's very frustrating. I mean, Judy Comey, she's beautiful, but we don't need to see her hair. For her to be beautiful, A, and B, she's a prioress. So we should not be seeing her hair. We just shouldn't. Generally, the Judy Comey, the clothing she's wearing is mostly fantasy, but even in general, silhouette is from a much later era. So it's just so frustrating. I wouldn't care if people had a really solid education on medieval history, if people had a good realistic idea about how people dressed, the kind of foods they ate, what life was like, medieval hygiene, but most people don't, and this is the only way they can see it in a way that's digestible for the average person, and all they ever see is inaccuracies. They have all the wrong ideas, and I can see it in the comments. I keep getting in the comments. So I just published a short about the medieval peasant diet across most of Europe for most of the 1,000 years that is the Middle Ages, actually being more nutritionally dense than the diet of the nobility, because the nobility were generally eating a lot more meat and a lot fewer vegetables and a lot of white bread, whereas the peasants were eating root vegetables, greens, wild herbs. They were eating a lot of pulses, legumes. They were eating, more organs, less of the lean meat, less of the muscle meat when they did eat meat. And they did actually get meat also. But in general, peasants had a more nutritionally dense diet. And by peasant, we're not peasant. That's the problem. The word peasant. Mason, what do you think of when you hear the word peasant?
Typically, I would say I think of just your average medieval depiction. You'll see a lot of the illustrations. That's usually what I think of. The illustrations like the fields. That's my first thought. What first comes to mind.
So describe this person. What do they look like to you in your mind?
Just
like, what are they doing? What are they wearing?
Yeah, the average, just your normal like medieval clothing. There, I imagine usually some sort of job, not necessarily like just maybe like in a field, maybe sewing something. I don't know. In my head, they're just doing some sort of labor in my head. Not
right. So, but what are they wearing generally?
Colors, first of all.
Yes, I meant like garments. So like tunics, right?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I misunderstood that entirely. That's
okay. Yeah, no, I mean colors. Yeah, but they're wearing tunics, right? And they're they're out in the fields, right? So a peasant is someone who works in a field. Yeah. For some reason, the word peasant has become synonymous in a lot of modern English speakers' minds with poor person. And it's also become synonymous with serf. And neither of those things are true. El jodedor, bienvenido. It's become synonymous with serf. And it turns out, actually, that a lot of the Victorian scholarship that created our idea of medieval history, and this is going to shock you, Mason, when I say this, try not to pass out from surprise, was inaccurate. The Victorian, really? Yeah, I know, it's shocking. It's shocking to hear that the Victorian historians, pioneers though they were in medieval historiography, and I can't, I thank them for being the people who laid the groundwork, right? They did a lot of really hard work. Oh, yeah. They trawled through primary sources, manuscripts, they transcribed them and they published them. In some cases, they translated them. Like, we have a lot of really great resources now. thanks to the hard work of all of those Victorian scholars. But unfortunately, at the same time, they came up with a lot of inaccurate ideas
Yeah.
about the medieval world, and they viewed it through. I mean, there's always going to be bias. I can't. We're
Oh, yeah.
humans. It will be impossible to be objective. But and apparently it's the Victorians, especially looking at medieval history through a very Anglo-centric lens, unsurprisingly, decided that their view of the Middle Ages must apply to all of the Middle Ages across Europe. And so they came up with this idea that, serfdom, there's, serfs are everywhere. Most people are serfs for most of the Middle Ages across all of Europe. And that idea kind of became pervasive, but it turns out that's not true. That serfdom was actually a very short period of medieval history, actually, and was not everywhere to be found in Europe in any case. So, for instance, Italy didn't really ever have serfdom. So the idea that peasant is a synonym for serf is incorrect just out the gate. The idea that serfs were poor, and there's this idea serfs means someone who wears rags and is starving and lives in the mud and is just waiting for progress to happen someday. Hopefully the modern era will start. Like that's what the average person imagines when they think of a serf, but that's not true either.
I think when a lot of people think of like a peasant, they hear the word peasant, you're right, they think of like dirty, like smelly, they think like dull, like all that stuff. I think for the average person, you first hear the word peasant, you think all that stuff.
Yep. And it turns out it's not true. And the problem is that the word peasant, like the word serf, does a lot of the thinking for us. Right.
Yeah.
So we don't question that. We think, oh, serf equals synonym for poor person. Poor people, ergo, don't eat well. They suffer from malnutrition. They live in hovels where the rain just leaks through the roof, and they die at the age of 30. Right? That's the common thing. So when I say that the bottom 80% of the population in Europe had a more nutritionally dense diet than their betters, the bottom 80% wasn't poor. They just weren't rich, right? I think that's part of the problem. People imagine, therefore, that 80% of the population was living in Dickensian squalor. And that's just not true.
No.
The Dickensian, and this, I think this really, this creates a cognitive dissonance for people when I say that poor people had it better in the Middle Ages in medieval Europe than they had it in the modern era.
Yeah.
The Victorian was a low point. The Victorian era, the 19th century, is a real low point in human history in Europe and in America for how we treat our fellow man. The gap between rich and poor reaches its apogee at the end of the 19th century with the robber barons, you've got Vanderbilt building his neo-Renaissance French chateau in North Carolina in Asheville. That makes real French chateau look pathetic by comparison. So it's a really bad time, and that's not the Middle Ages. It's like all these things can you think of other deleterious conditions that are actually 19th century that people ascribe to the Middle Ages?
I don't know. There's a lot to have to figure out one. I mean, I think we think of the conditions in the workhouses. A lot of people associate the conditions in the workhouses with how medieval workers would have been living.
Right. That's a really good one. Yeah, the workhouses that Dickens, paints very vividly for us in many of his works. Right. Yeah. So what is the difference between, first off, do you know what was the equivalent of a workhouse in the Middle Ages? Do you know if there was an equivalent?
I couldn't confidently say, no.
So I would say that the closest thing to a workhouse. So what is a workhouse? Let's define a workhouse. What is a workhouse? Because not everyone might know actually what a workhouse is.
No. I promise everyone, I'm not stupid for the viewers, but just to clarify.
No one thinks. Goodness gracious, no one thinks you're. I mean, so what is a workhouse exactly?
I mean, when you think workhouse, you think the workhouses are, well, the Victorian sense, of course. The
Mhm.
workhouses are, well, you have, well, the people working essentially. That sounds very dumb, but it's where people are in there. They are doing. It depends really what they're doing, but a certain thing, they're all in there, and that's what the whole point is.
Who gets sent to
Yeah, the
workhouses?
workhouse is. Oh, here are people. I mean, in the Victorian era, a lot of children were there were child
Oh
workhouses,
yeah,
you
for
could
certain,
say.
but it's the impoverished, right? It's people who are
Oh yeah,
poor,
sorry.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, homeless
yeah.
people who are so poor they can't afford shelter. They were sent to the workhouses to live, and they were given shelter and they were given food, but they were forced to work, and the conditions were terrible, right? So
Yeah.
that's the Victorian answer to poverty. The medieval answer to poverty, the closest equivalent there is. Do you know what it is? Can you? I've talked about it a lot on my live streams.
Uh, the medieval equivalent to poverty.
No, to the workhouses.
Oh, the
Yeah.
workhouses.
What?
So I thought you meant
No,
poverty.
no,
It's
no,
like
no. The middle equivalent to poverty is poverty, but no. The no.
I was gonna
What's the
say.
medieval equivalent to workhouses? Can you think? Can you think of something? It's not in the sense of being negative, but in the sense a place where people really down on the luck could go, could get food, could get shelter, could get clothing, and get work.
Oh, I forget the word. I forget the word.
Hospitals.
Uh,
They went to hospitals.
yes.
Yeah. So so medieval hospitals were these fantastic institutions that started out as actually hosteleries for pilgrims, right? They started off as a place where pilgrims could go on their way to various pilgrimage sites and stay for free, in fact, and be given safe lodging, comfortable bedding, clean food, the whole thing. And it was part of the pilgrimage experience, right? And then
Mhm.
over time, they expanded their services to include care for the sick, hospice care for people who were dying, care for the homeless, soup kitchen. Also, they started providing job training for people. They started providing jobs for people who otherwise maybe couldn't get jobs in the community because they didn't have the training yet. And they also had orphanages. And the orphanages would not only we have records from these hospitals that just show the most amazing level of giving back to the community. They would get these orphans and they would raise them and they would place them in apprenticeships, which was not a free thing, by the way. You had to pay to get an apprenticeship. So they would put them in apprenticeships so they would get job training and be able to actually climb the socioeconomic ladder and be able to support themselves. For young women who wanted to marry, they would actually give them dowry so that they could make a good marriage. There's the ill. If you were sick, you went to the hospital and they would take care of you. Physician would check, would do the rounds, just like doctors do rounds now. They would do the rounds every morning. The physician would check on you. The physician would analyze your urine every single morning to see how you were doing. And they would provide care, nursing care, your clothing and food would be taken care of. And if you needed work, you could get work there. So this is the medieval version of a workhouse, is this wonderful institution that actually provided a future, versus the Victorian workhouses, which basically became a kind of form of permanent poverty because it didn't actually ever get them to the point where they could leave the workhouse. So, I think you're right. I think people imagine poverty. They imagine the world of Dickens. They imagine a medieval workhouse or a Victorian workhouse, and they just back project that onto the Middle Ages, right? Because
Yeah,
obviously
definitely.
history is a straight line. Like since we started evolving, since we fell out of the trees in Africa as primates, a million years ago and started making our way out of the savannas into the rest of the world. It's just been straight up. Humans have just been on a constant upward trajectory. We've never had any setbacks. Never.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. No, there's never been anything to change that. Of course, it's always just been a straight line.
Straight line up.
Of course.
So if it was bad in the 19th century, then it just must have been so much worse in the 15th century, which is unfortunately not true.
Because of course we don't, as cultures, we don't change ideas or have these events that alter systems or beliefs.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, it's obviously we just keep on keeping on, and the good things that we had before we never forget about or lose.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just keep on keeping on. Yeah. So I've been listening. I've got a new historian that I've fallen in crush with, Dr. Ada Palmer. She's a professor at the University of Chicago, and I swear to God, she's got to be in the SCA. I think I know her actually from like 20 or 30 years ago at Penzic. But she's a scholar who specializes on the Renaissance as such, and she published a book last year called "Inventing the Renaissance." And she featured in the New York Times because she actually does living history as part of her college courses. So she actually took her students and actually made them go through a medieval papal election by playing the different roles in the papal election so that they could understand the process of electing a pope in the Middle Ages. And she's so ingenuitive in the way she teaches that, like I said, she got featured in the New York Times for being innovative in how she conveys information and makes the information much more three-dimensional for her students. So Ada Palmer, she doesn't have a YouTube channel as far as I know, but she's been interviewed hundreds of times on a variety of topics. She's got this great interview where she talks about Machiavelli, who's probably the most misunderstood historical character in the history of the world. And she goes, it's like a 2-hour interview, and she's such an eloquent speaker. She has such an encyclopedic depth of knowledge. And I already knew a lot about Machiavelli, but I learned even more by listening to her. And she's clearly working from primary sources, and she even quotes them. So it's really, Ada Palmer, can highly recommend giving her a look. Because as she points out the Renaissance is not a period of time, right? It has no discrete beginning. It has no discrete end. It's actually a cultural movement. And different places receive that cultural movement at different times.
Yeah, there's no day it starts, day it ends. It's not like some event where you can mark on this time, like this day, or you can't do that because it's not like an event as much as it is I don't want to use the word mentality, but you know what I mean.
No, it's a movement. It is a kind of mentality. And it doesn't affect all aspects of society, even within one geography, equally, right? Like people, the peasants in 15th century Tuscany might not have felt the effects of the Renaissance so much, or at all, in fact. Because they don't care that in downtown Florence at the Palazzo Medici there's a whole bunch of people learning how to write poetry in Greek. Like that doesn't impact in ancient Greek. That doesn't impact them at all. It doesn't change their lives in any way, shape, or form. The beautiful sculptures that are that Donatello is making, that doesn't impact the peasant in Prato, right? It doesn't impact them in any way. It doesn't actually change their lives significantly. So her book, Inventing the Renaissance, is a very interesting read. I can highly recommend it. And she points out that the Renaissance is basically a term that gets applied to something we all find to be good, right? Oh, it's wonderful. All of this wonderful architecture and all this painting coming out of Italy in the 14th century. Well, that's the Renaissance. England, well, Shakespeare, all of the wonderful theater being written and performed in Elizabethan England. Well, that's the Renaissance. Meanwhile, in Italy, the Renaissance ended in like 1525 with the sacking of Pavia. So, yeah, I try to avoid the term Renaissance because I think it also does too much of the thinking for people, and it creates this idea that everything that came before was benighted. I think that's another part of the problem with that term. Okay, that's an interesting comment. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about using the term Renaissance, Mason? Do you avoid it? Do you prefer to stick to more dates rather than epical terminology?
Yeah, I try. Well, of course, as you know, my focus tends to be more so on England itself,
Right.
right? Not as much, but so typically when I'm talking, I will sometimes use the broader terms because sometimes that's what gets people to actually acknowledge it. But I try as much as I can to stick with like uh, dates for things, or if I have to describe a period, sometimes I will use the monarch as an
Mm,
example of the time. Because of course, as with England studies, we have these periods we call them, and of course, they usually go off some form of the
yeah,
monarch's
it's
name.
dynastic, right? Which makes sense.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
dynasties. Yeah, I try to use dynastic terms just for like, like I focus on the Tudor period. So of course, that's what I say because that itself too also gets a lot of thought.
It
But
does.
I
It,
try
it
to avoid.
does. It's really funny because people think like, oh, the Tudor era, the Middle Ages is over. It's like, oh, with Henry VII, it definitely
Yeah,
isn't over. The Middle Ages is
no.
definitely still happening.
So I'll try to avoid terms like Renaissance, but I will use like dynastic terms or
Right.
dates as often as I can.
Right. Yeah. Of course, in Asia here, it's dynasties, right? It's all about the dynasties. So, it's the Joseon dynasty, the Goryeo dynasty, the Ming dynasty, the Qing dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, right? It's all dynasties. And dynasties absolutely have fixed beginnings and endings. But there again, I get really Korean museums. Oh my God, it's so frustrating. Most objects here in Korea, if objects in a museum, the date, they use the dynasty date. They're like, oh, Joseon dynasty. Well, the Joseon dynasty is 600 years. So is this the beginning of the Joseon dynasty, the middle, or the end of the Joseon dynasty? Can you please at least give a century? If if not an actual date, how about a century? And so I get very frustrated at museums here because I don't, I need to know, is this the 15th century in the Joseon dynasty or the 19th century? It covers this massive, massive period. So I find in some dynasties, I think are also very deceptive because they're useful for knowing who is in power, but they're not useful for knowing anything about actual daily life for people, I think is what it comes down to for me. Yeah. You still there, Mason? Oh, okay.
You can hear me,
Yeah,
right? I need
yeah,
to make sure my
yeah. No, I can. It
because
just
I have a microphone, but I have to make sure that I'm not going to be cutting out.
no. The sound is good now that you've switched to whatever it is to which you have switched. So yeah, this idea, this brings us back to the idea that everyone in the Middle Ages was poor. It's just not
Yeah.
true. It's just not true. Have you done any reading up on poverty in the Tudor era? How it was handled? What kinds of percentages of people were actually poor?
Not very recently. I have kind of stepped back recently from my work. I've just had things to do, but uh, I do hopefully soon plan to get some time aside to do my usual research and you know.
Yeah, there's a great book called Surviving Poverty in Medieval Paris. I can highly recommend it for anyone who's interested. Um, the percentages, obviously, usual caveat, everyone. Medieval Europe is not a monolith. It's 1,000 years of history, and it's a whole continent, which is highly regional even to this day, in fact. So usual caveat, but
Yeah.
poverty is not as widespread at all through most of the Middle Ages as people think it is. And it's not until we hit the modern era, the 16th century, until poverty starts to sharply rise. And then in the 18th century, it starts to skyrocket. Do you know the event that happens in the 16th century across Europe, many parts of Europe, that really causes a spike in poverty, the rise of poverty?
You said the 16th
Mm-hmm.
century?
Yep, it happens. It starts in Tudor England. I think it's Tudor England is the first place to do it, and then the idea spreads.
There's a few things that I could. I also don't think I can confidently give an answer. There's be a couple things that I have to. Starts in Tudor England. I don't think I can confidently answer that.
Okay, so the one of the biggest things that triggers massive poverty in Europe, and it has knock-on effects for literally centuries until the 20th century. In fact, the Enclosure Acts. Have you ever heard of the Enclosure Acts?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Do you know what they are?
I can't recall.
Okay.
No.
So before, so in the early 20th century, this is going to sound like a tangent, but it's not. In the early 20th century, or the first half of the 20th century, mid 20th century, I should say, when, it was communism versus capitalism, a bunch of scholars were doing research, and that research was getting taken up by various political institutions, and because of the communal nature of the Middle Ages, where a lot more property was held in common, where there were commons, where there were institutions aimed at, providing for the community, they pointed at the Middle Ages as being a dirty time of communism. Dirty, dark, dank time, and that's evil, and the Middle Ages, bad. But the Renaissance is started because of capitalism, and so the Renaissance is good, and everything that came after as part of a good capitalist society, that was good as well. And it's actually true, because before the Enclosure Acts in England, all across England, there were what were called common greens. The commons, the land where it was green, it was pastures, basically, to which everyone had access to graze their animals. And so that meant that you could have a pig and a cow and a goat and a sheep, and you didn't actually have to have land for them. They could just live in a shed attached to your little house, but you could take them out and graze them and then bring them back again. Well, the Enclosure Acts decided that was bad. Having all that land divided up especially amongst all of those people, bad. So they enclosed the fields and they privatized them and they handed them off to private landowners. And so they basically consolidated large swaths of land into the hands of a very few, and they disenfranchised millions of people who relied on those commons in order to be able to support themselves. Right? Because before, they could support themselves. They could sustain themselves. They could have a goat, they could have a cow, they could have some chickens, they could have, a pig, they could have a sheep, or a couple of sheep even. And they could have a place to actually feed them. And now they didn't. Now they didn't have a place for them to be at all. And it not only did it disenfranchise all those people, it concentrated vast amounts of wealth towards the top. Right. And so that's the first step towards impoverishing the English. And other kingdoms, other polities throughout Europe looked at England and said, wow, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. We should do that. And so that was step one. And Jim O'Neill says, I was going to say, yeah, so they stole the land from the people. They did. Yeah. But not in the Middle Ages. Not in the Middle Ages. This is the early modern era. This is one of the first things that Tudors do, basically, is pass the Enclosure Acts. Yeah. And that's how we get those big landholders who have all the money and all the power and all the resources. And then these people are forced then to find other ways to make a living. And there aren't necessarily that many alternative ways to make a living unless you can afford, say, an apprenticeship. And apprenticeships cost money. And of course, at the same time as, the Enclosure Acts happen, and then what happens to the Catholic Church in England? It goes away, right?
Yeah.
So Henry shuts down all of those monasteries, but one of the biggest roles of those monasteries, and this is something a lot of people don't like to hear, but here it is. One of their biggest roles was their charitable institutions, their hospitals, their training programs, their jobs programs, their housing for the poor, feeding the poor, housing the sick, caring for the sick, right? And those all shut down. That was like about 30 years later, I think, after the first Enclosure Acts. So,
Pretty sure.
So step two, close down, and then with the Reformation, that spread across Europe. And basically, in all the places where the Protestants got power, in many cases, they forced those monasteries to close. And so there went all of those charitable institutions with them. And guess what? The Protestants didn't really believe in.
Well, the Pope, for one.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's fine. They didn't believe in charity.
Oh, all right. No.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, of course, but I remember we talked about it. And they were also part of was it the bath? No, it wasn't the bathhouses. It was something.
Oh yeah, a lot of them closed the bathhouses down because they thought they were denizens of sin. Yeah, they were dens of iniquity, right? So yeah, they closed down a lot of the bathhouses too. Not everywhere, but a lot of the cities. But some of the bathhouse in a lot of places, the bathhouses had kind of fallen out of favor anyway because people thought that was how you caught the plague. And also because of the rise of diseases like syphilis, right? So the bathhouses had kind of already, in many places, had kind of started to lose popularity in the 16th century anyway. But even then, apparently, in a lot of places where Protestants took power, they closed them down for moral reasons. Yeah. Yeah. Comment. He tore down all of those beautiful all of the abbeys and monasteries. Yeah. He didn't tear down the castles. He did tear down the monasteries and the abbeys in many cases. Yeah, 100%. But that meant that there were no more of these charitable institutions in many places in Europe. And then poverty was moralized. In the 16th century, you see the rise of the moralization of poverty, that people who are poor because they're lazy or because they're immoral, and so God is punishing them for being immoral. And also, you're under no obligation to actually do anything to remedy their poverty, therefore, because they're poor because they deserve it. And you're rich, obviously, because you're morally good and just. And so you don't have to do anything to help those who are not as fortunate as you, because you're fortunate because God has blessed you, because you're good. It's like this perfect circle of logic, right? There's no way to break into it. So yeah, that's the problem, is that people imagine that world, which is actually the world of the modern era, which is the world of the post-medieval world, and then they back project that onto the medieval world, and it's just inaccurate and incorrect. It's very, very frustrating. I don't know how often I get that comment. Anytime I try to point out that the Middle Ages wasn't as bleak as it was, but yes, it was. That's their answer. Yes, it was. Well, why do you think that? Because it was. That's not how logic works.
And I think we can trace a lot of the modern perception of the Middle Ages to, of course, not only stuff the Victorians have said, but a lot of Hollywood and just film in general has also kind of tarnished the idea of the Middle Ages with this idea of it's all dull and it's just dirty and it's just gross and you wouldn't want to be there. And I mean, I agree with not wanting to be there, but it's just they give it the idea that it's just like terribly like just gross and boring.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I got it. Maybe it was Rosalie Gilbert who commented relatively recently that there's this myth that the Middle Ages was a bunch of people sitting around in mud waiting for progress to happen. And I think that really captures the myth really well. In this interview with Ada Palmer, the gentleman who was interviewing her I don't know what what his normal thing is, but he interviewed her a whole bunch. He strikes me as a tech bro just by his energy, his tech bro energy, but not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. Just, I don't know how to explain it. Not in a bad way. Just like you can maybe see him developing some kind of app that would go, and then he could become a billionaire overnight, like that kind of thing. Anyway, he commented that the pace of human progress has been constantly accelerating. And Dr. Palmer said, but it really hasn't. She said, we've been progressing the whole time. The thing is, the difference is, though, that the advancements and innovations that happen in the Middle Ages, you don't care about. She's like, because, and she didn't mean that meanly. She just meant it's not something that you think about because you take it for granted because it's already been incorporated into the level of tech that we now have. She said, progress was happening the whole time, agricultural innovation. And she pointed out that in the 15th century alone, there were like 10 specific leaps in art that allowed them to go from the relatively flat colors of the 14th century in paintings and frescoes and whatnot to the, oh my God, stunning lifelike oils that the Dutch masters, the Flemish masters, were using in the 15th century. And there's like 10 specific innovations, changes, inventions that happen that allow that to occur. That's pretty rapid, in a couple of decades to basically figure out these, make these 10 big changes in how they process pigments and how they mixed oils. And then suddenly you go to Van Eyck being able to paint gold that looks like gold, but it's not gold. It's not actually gold, right? Like, that's amazing. And as she pointed out, in the 15th century, that was really important, but that's not so important to you. She also pointed out, I didn't think about this. Have you ever played the game Civilization?
No.
I have never played it either, but as she pointed out, it's probably the #1 teacher of medieval history in the world. Because literally billions of people have played it and have been playing it since they were, tweens. And so a lot of their impressions about the medieval world come from playing that game, also from Assassin's Creed. And she pointed out that in Civilization, as time goes forward, a turn becomes shorter and shorter of a period. So, like, in the Dark Ages, in the first millennium, a turn represents 50 years. And then you get into the 14th century and a turn is 25 years. And then you get into the early modern era and a turn is 10 years. And then, you hit the 18th century or the 19th century and a turn is like a year. And so it gives you this impression that progress was really slow before. Nothing really changed in those 50 years, which is why a turn is 50 years. Whereas by the 19th century, things are changing all the time. And so she actually attributes people's misconception about medieval progress in the Middle Ages in general to that. And I thought that was really interesting. Because it never would have occurred to me to look at gaming culture to see why people might think a certain way. Oh, good. A bunch of comments, just fun. AC Origins is such a good representation of ancient Egypt, and the Tor function is golden. AC Origins, is that also Civilization? Is that a Civilization split off? I don't play video games. I feel like I'm wasting my life literally if I play a video game. A couple of exceptions. I did play the Myst games when they came out because those were puzzle solving games, and I love puzzles. Almost, actually, it's funny, just realized it. Myst is like a precursor to the escape room. But otherwise, I like to spend my life actually making things and learning things. So I feel like video games just literally are wasting the limited time I have on this earth, which is not a judgment on anyone else's choice of, if video games are your thing, good for you, but I can't bring myself to do it. So I have not played Civilization. I've not played Age of Empires, Assassin's Creed, Kingdom Come Deliverance. I've I've gone through Kingdom Come Deliverance with Philip to critique the clothing, but I was sewing something while he controlled the person. So yeah, I just don't, I don't know. Are you interested in any of those historical or pseudo historical video games? And I
No.
won't judge you if you are. It's okay. It's really okay.
I find a lot of them, I either just either can't get into them, or they're just hard to do it with every 5 minutes being like, oh, what about this? You know, kind of like whenever you try to watch something when it's about something you know a fair bit about, and it's just like, what are they doing?
So
But I
you
don't.
can't handle the inaccuracies.
Some things I can. It depends how interesting you make it. If you can make it interesting enough, then sometimes I can get through it. But some of them is just too much.
Yeah, I understand. I Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is actually much better than I expected it to be in terms of authenticity and accuracy. It still wasn't 100%, and God knows the women wandering around with no smocks on. This is a smock. And just the kirtle, this is a kirtle, with their breasts almost falling out. No, just no. Absolutely not. No one would do that. Not even prostitutes. That's another myth about, medieval and Renaissance prostitutes and courtesans, that they were walking around skimpily dressed with everything flaunted and visible, on display for their clients. But that's just the furthest from the truth. In fact, very often laws were passed that required prostitutes to wear more clothing than the regular women, to cover themselves up even more, to wear special hoods and special cloaks and special shoes in some cases that were not sexy. We're not talking about sexy clothes. We're talking about more clothes.
Yeah.
So that's another, they depict, the sex worker in a tavern in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and you're wondering what miracle of God is actually keeping her breast in her dress as she moves around. And that's just not how it would have worked. Not at all.
No. What was I gonna say? I had a point to make about something. I don't remember.
Go on.
It reminds me that pretty much games and film, especially the hair, everyone's hair.
Yeah.
The women with their hair completely uncovered.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
Just out, and just sometimes not even anything done with it. Just the hair, and that's why I can't watch. When it comes to the anything to do with Henry VIII specifically, I can't watch most of it because everyone just has their hair out and just like everywhere, and it's just so hard to watch.
Yeah.
And I think
hair. I think hair is, it's one of the, I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. A modern person wearing modern clothes, but with their hair done in the appropriate coiffure, with the appropriate headdress, hat, cap, whatever is appropriate for your depiction, looks like a medieval person wearing a modern costume. But someone wearing medieval everything from the neck down, like this, but with modern hair, modern makeup above, just looks like a modern person wearing a costume. To me, they don't look historical at all. But someone with the right look from the head up, to me, looks like a medieval person, modern cosplaying. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I agree. It's what you do with your hair, your head, your face, all of that, I think, is what can really determine. Right? Like you said, you could wear just modern clothes from the neck down, but what you do with your head, your hair, all that stuff is what really kind of can make the difference.
It really
you
does.
could wear a fully accurate costume except for the neck up, and it just won't look right.
Yeah, comment from Ayla. Stays corsets on bare skin is such a pet peeve for me. Oh, amen, Ayla. Amen, sister.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Bridgerton.
We don't talk about Bridgerton anymore.
We
That
don't
was
talk about Bridgerton anymore. Oh my God. Anyone who actually tries that will tell you it is so uncomfortable. And then people say, oh goodness, women must have been so uncomfortable back then. No, because women weren't stupid. Because they knew how to dress in a way that was comfortable, which means layer against the skin and then stays over top of them.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, stays against the skin.
Yeah. One thing that always bothers me is when I see the word medieval and corset in the same sentence.
Yes. Yes, thank you. That was I was about to bring that up because there was a comment recently about a question actually about corsetry in the Middle Ages, and the answer is really simple. There wasn't any.
Exactly. I think when anyone thinks of anything, just like not even like similarly looking, just with a similar placement, I think a lot of people kind of associate, oh, must be a corset. It's like when they see anything like on the body, that's like it's a similar positioning. They're like, oh yeah, you must be struggling to breathe. How are you breathing? Why are you breathing?
Yeah. I mean, so we'll switch forward a little bit to the Victorian era, just because you mentioned the breathing thing, which is generally, oh my gosh, tight lacing in the Victorian era, how cruel. There was tight lacing, it did happen, but not many women did that.
No,
not many.
Not everyone's out there like fainting because they're just too tightly laced.
They're not. And yes, we do have some skeletons from the Victoria. I've seen them. There's one in the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. We have some skeletons of women who really did tight lace, and yeah, their rib cages are whew, but that was not most of the women. That curvy look that everyone sees isn't their body. It's all fake. They actually had falsies that you could buy. I've seen advertisements from them from the newspapers, falsies that you can get to pad your corset top so that you have a nice extra buxom bosom, right? For that nice look that you've got. And they had hip pads so that hip and butt pads so that you could pad your hips out to get that really nice hourglass figure. They are not actually squeezing their body into the hourglass. They're not. Yeah. They're just not.
I think people also forget that there's still ways to alter photographs even at this point. I think people forget that too. They'll point out images like, oh wow, their waists are so tiny. That's because they're altering the photos.
Yep.
It's not because they're that thin. They're not like this. They're not this thin. They're just altering the photos.
And we know that they weren't all that thin because we have examples of Kaiserin Elisabeth, Sissi, the famous beauty of the 19th century Europe, the Austrian empress, right? She had, hair down to her ankles. She was a fitness nut. She was bulimic. She was anorexic. She was both. And she was a fitness nut. And we know that the so-called, the 16-inch waist was not common because everyone marveled over her 16-inch waist. Everyone was like, oh, wow, she's got a 16-inch waist. Not, oh, yeah, she's got a 16-inch waist like the rest of us.
Good look. I mean.
Right. Like you don't marvel over something if it's common for everyone, but everyone marveled over her figure because she was a fitness nut. Like she really did. She worked out every day. Like this is before it was common for women to go to a gym, but she was obsessed with keeping her pre-pregnancy teenage figure, even though she'd had 4 children. So, yeah.
They're not out here like, oh yeah, big up. I mean, me and Marjorie were out there last week. We already beat that. They weren't doing that. No, they're like, oh my gosh.
16 inches, huh? Did she die from malnutrition? Oh no. Oh, no. Mason, no, she didn't. The death of Kaiserin Elisabeth Sissi was tragic. Do you know how she died?
I made a mistake. Wasn't she assassinated?
Yeah. Do you know how? Did you hear the story? She was assassinated.
I've heard the story. I don't remember much of it though. I do remember.
Okay. Okay, so
Read me about it.
Kaiserin Elisabeth was the Empress of Austria in the 19th century, and she's kind of like the last great Empress of Austria. And she was from the Bavarian. She came from a branch of the Wittelsbach family. You know, her father was a Duke of Bavaria, but not the Duke of Bavaria. It's aristocracy in 19th century Germany is a mess. Anyway, she's actually the cousin of the emperor. Her mother and the emperor's mother are sisters. God bless, inbreeding in 19th century Europe. And he fell in love with her. She didn't fall in love with him, but he insisted on the marriage. And so she gets married at the age of 16. She has a very unhappy life because she grew up in a very free household where she was allowed to do whatever she wants. She rode horses. She went out for picnics. Like she knew nothing about court etiquette, and court etiquette literally suffocated her. And she was miserable. Her mother-in-law hated her and treated her with contempt and controlled her. Her husband was a mama's boy, so that wasn't super great. And she eventually managed to eke out some freedom for herself. And she would actually travel. She tried to never be at the Austrian court whenever she could avoid it because she hated that life. So she was traveling. She was in Switzerland. She was in Geneva. And she was preparing to actually board her steamer ship. And remember I said she was a fitness freak? So she walked places. Woman after my own heart. She would rather walk than take a carriage. Can you imagine the Empress of Austria just walking to the ship, down to the dock from her hotel instead of taking a carriage? I mean, what a cool woman. Unfortunately for her, this is the era of anarchists. This is the end of the 19th century. This is when there's big anti-monarchical movements, anti-aristocratic movements. Like there's been a series of revolutions starting at the end of the 18th century, continuously through the 19th century, trying to basically bring about democracy or democratization anyway. So there's this anarchist, and I forget the asshole's name. Excuse my language. There's this anarchist there. And he was actually looking to assassinate the Duke of Orleans, but he missed his opportunity. So he thought he was going to kind of have to just go home empty-handed or move on to another target. And he's walking down the street and he spots Sisi. Everyone knew what she looked like, right? She's like even in her, I think at this point she's in her 50s or early 60s. She's still beautiful. She's still stunning. And she, especially for her age, and he spots her, he recognizes her. And so he takes a stiletto and he walks up to her and he pretends to run into her and he pierces her corset with the stiletto. And at first she thinks she's just been punched because that's all she feels. Her corset is so tight that nothing happens. Literally her corset keeps her alive for another while, but she starts to get weaker. And she's hurting, but she doesn't understand what's happened. So they take her to the steamer ship and they realize something horrible has happened. They cut her corset off of her and she exsanguinates because he pierced her heart. So, yeah, the death of Empress Sisi is tragic and unnecessary.
It is.
And yeah, it's so sad because she finally, towards the last years of her life, secured some amount of personal freedom and had basically shed the shackles of the Austrian court. And she gets taken out as a random statement against the monarchy that she never wanted to be part of. She didn't even want to be part of the monarchy. No. She really didn't. She was forced into it. It's so horribly tragic. It really is. And it's like, it's so, I think in those moments when she still has the corset on, it's like, there was literally nothing they could have done. I can't even think modernly of any way they could have prevented exsanguination, without, it's just, I don't even think modern medicine could have saved her, honestly.
Oh.
It's so, every time I go through the story in my head, I'm screaming, don't walk, take the carriage. I'm like, don't walk, take the carriage, Sissy. Just be a little lazy for once, because then she wouldn't have died. He would have had no access to her.
I've always had a soft spot for her because it's just
Oh, Ursula Bear says the PBS series is so full of falsehoods. Then was Ursula? I haven't seen the PBS series. Was the PBS series, was it a drama, or are we talking a documentary? I haven't seen it, but having lived in Germany and lived in Europe for a large chunk of my life, CC is the obsession for a lot of Europeans. There were a bunch of really happy, unfortunately, very untrue movies made in the 50s about CC and Franz, and they presented her story as mostly being this wonderful romance, right? And it just wasn't. It was not that. That is not what it was. She was forced. It was supposed to be her sister. It was supposed to be Helena. She was supposed to be the one, Nani as they called her. She was the one who was supposed to become the Empress of Austria. She was raised for it. She wanted it. And then Franz sees her younger, stunning sister, and he decides he will have no one but her. And yes, technically there are no forced marriages, but the alternative was not going to be pleasant for her. She was probably going to suffer a major punishment for refusing to accept that particular arrangement. Yeah. So yeah, that's the story of Cece. And that's the story of, basically that's tight lacing in a nutshell. Not many women did it. All of those figures you see are either photoshopped, like you said, in the 19th century photos of Victorian women, or they're wearing cleverly made clothing that gives their body a shape it doesn't have. That sounds familiar. Have any of you heard of Spanx? Here, oh gosh, here in Korea, I was just walking down one of the underground shopping corridors, and guess what I saw, Mason? Speaking of things that make your body look like it shouldn't, or it doesn't. I saw fake butt pads. You still there?
Yep. I mean, to be fair, this has been a thing for a while.
Yeah, it's a shop. The whole shop sold nothing but fake butts. So basically, a pair of biker shorts with butt cheeks on the back to give you a rounder derriere. And I'm thinking my derriere is round enough. If I put those on, I would look like I had some kind of anaphylactic reaction to something.
In a time.
Yeah.
In a time where it's still so common, you'd think we'd understand that. We're not the first people to think of that.
Nope, we're definitely not.
Like, it's very still common today. You'd think we'd kind of realize, wait a minute, obviously we're the first people to think of this.
No, humans have been ornamenting and modifying themselves for millennia, if not eons, honestly. Do you know what the medieval butt augmentation technique was? What they actually had them in the 14th century. How women gave themselves bigger bubble butts.
I think if you say it, I would know, but
foxtails. They actually put foxtails under, not on top, under their garments. They would wear them over. Basically, they would tie them on over their smocks, and then put their kirtle and then their coat on, and that would give them that you see. And if you start looking for it. Look at the silhouettes of 14th century women, and you're going to realize that once again they've got these relatively smallish waists, but more importantly, they've got big butts, and those are foxtails. Yep. And we know that because there's at least one sermon from the late 14th century that rails about them using foxtails to give themselves butts that God did not intend. Right. So yeah, we've been figuring out ways to change our shapes since time immemorial. Women and in some cases men have used fake hair to make their hair look more luxurious and full than it actually is. Not a new concept. So no tight lacing. No tight lacing, not a common practice in the Victorian era, did not exist in the Middle Ages for women. Have you ever heard of tight lacing for men in the Middle Ages, though?
No.
So
You've been
apparently, tight
you've mentioned.
lacing was a thing for knights in the 14th century. It was apparently a practice they actually did. There's a couple of knightly treatises, what we might call fighting manuals or treatises on chivalry from the 14th century, in which the authors rail against knights who've grown too rotund, who have gained too much in the waist, tight lacing their coats so that it gives them a waist they had in their youth. So apparently, men in the 14th century were actually truly tight lacing to give themselves that chalice shape that you see. Not the women, the men.
The men.
The men were. And specifically the knights. Like this treatise really talks about it several times. You can tell he's very bothered by it. Like, and my fellow senior knights who have grown rotund embarrass themselves by lacing themselves so tightly into their coats that they look like a sausage about to explode. Like, oh wow, not the women, the men. But it's not a corset. It's not a corset. It's soft. It's soft. It's a soft structuring garment. So it's padded. They were padded and they were quilted, but they've got no boning in them. So you can imagine that you'd have to breathe very carefully, not to burst your buttons or your laces. Yeah. So no, there is, but there's no evidence of boning. And some of my some of my fellow costumers, historical costumers who make 15th century Italian clothing, especially the second half of the 15th century, they like to put reeds or cording in their bodices to create that soft, rounded look. But I have never seen a single bit of evidence that actually supports, in the 15th century in Italy, cording or reeding or any kind of boning of that nature. I've not seen any evidence. At most, layers of padding. I have evidence of padding, of using cotton wadding to actually create the structure in the bodice, and that would be a much more likely, an easier way of doing it, right? And if you look at the Florentine portraits from the 15th century, you see that nice round kind of bust that they all have, and it's nice and smooth. I'm pretty certain that's created with the creative use of wadding, which I found in expense accounts from wedding trousseaus in the 15th century, which basically detail all of the materials that are required to make the clothes for this bride. And two of them now I found, 2 out of 2. I've looked at 2 different wedding trousseau expense accounts, and both of them call for bambaja, which is cotton wadding. And it's just enough for a bodice. It's not enough for any other part of the garment. So I'm pretty certain that they were padding and quilting these bodices to give it that nice round shape. But I've never seen evidence of cording. I've never seen evidence of reeds. Have you encountered people who have used reeds or cording to make their bodices stiffer?
No, not in the time we're referring to. I have been asked by some people, and I have to break the news that the time period they're looking for, it's not exactly the answer they're looking for there.
Yeah.
I remember I was once asked one time, someone asked me something about Anne Boleyn and corsets, and I sat there for a good minute and just thought about how I should answer something like that.
Well, I mean, it was no doubt an honest question.
Oh,
I mean,
is.
the tutors have done us no favor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not judging anyone for asking questions like this, right? As you should ask questions, honestly, you should be asking these questions because you want to be able to know this stuff. You should be able to know. You should be able to ask these questions. But sometimes
you don't know until you know. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I can't say anything. I've said stuff here, and you've you've always been able there, and you've been like, well, this is what it's like. So I mean, obviously, I'm not going to judge anyone for that because we've all been in that spot before. But sometimes you get a question, you got to think like, how do I respond to this in a way that's not like gonna make it sound like, well, actually,
Well, actually, yeah, it's true. So so what did you do you remember what you ended up saying, or what would you say if someone said, did Anne Boleyn wear a corset? What would you say?
I mean, I'd probably just explain what she would have worn, like
Which is?
You'd have your, I forget the term. You're gonna, what's I forget the term. Basically
Kirtle?
No, your main undergarment. I forget the term. What you're wearing now? Beneath your
the smock. The smock.
Smock. Yeah. Yes. You're wearing your smock. Then you have how do I not know this off the top of my head? I've look at this daily. You have your smock first off.
Talking about the petticoat?
Yes, yes. You'd have your petticoat. You would I believe the kirtle goes next, or yes.
Yep.
Your kirtle, then your actual like dress, like your gown, would be the next layer. You'd have your sleeves, your false sleeves that there are points inside the sleeve on which you could tie it with ribbons and different things. You could tie on those sleeves, and I had a pair somewhere. I don't know if I got rid of them that I made, but you tie them on. There was also false, what are they called? But they're often made to match your sleeves. You'd wear them, look like you had a more expensive in place of your kirtle, where your kirtle is, because of course that's showing through. You'd have, what was it called? I don't remember the term. I think it was a false something. They're often made to match your sleeves. So
you're talking about the false skirt, the panel in the front that
and you would just tie it on. Yeah. And it was they were made to match your false sleeves.
Right.
Then you'd have like your jewelry and stuff. You'd have your hood, which is one thing I want to talk about just briefly. People have this belief Anne Boleyn only ever wore a French hood.
Yeah.
No. I mean, she does popularize it somewhat, but one of the only contemporary image we do in fact have is a medal, and it is her with
it's an English hood.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or is it bonnet and frontlet, I believe is the term.
I think the one I'm thinking of is a gabled hood.
The gabled hood.
I mean, it's a gabled hood. The bonnet and the frontlet. Yep.
If I'm mistaken, French hood and gable hood, as well as English hood, are just terms that we kind of came up with later on for some of these things. Now, of course, there are words, but it's just a hood.
Yep.
There's one video, I don't remember who had it up, but it was this one lady, and she made replicas of a couple of different styles of hood. I thought that was very interesting. I want to try and find that later. Hopefully next stream I'll remember it, because it was actually really interesting to watch her try to reconstruct it. Because of course, a lot of the hoods we don't know exactly how they were made. We don't have any. We didn't have any surviving ones, obviously. So we have to kind of figure out. I love watching those videos where they'll try.
It is very much conjecture, but that's part of the fun, right? It's if I wanted, so I'm going to be honest, everyone. Historical costuming in the 19th century is what we call easy mode. Because we have an overabundance of evidence of how things were made, from detailed manuals telling you how to make these garments step by step from the era. We have so many extant garments. We've got so many depictions of people, so many records, right? The earlier and earlier you go in fashion history, the harder and harder it gets, the more challenging it gets, the more you actually do a lot of experimentation. And for me, part of the joy is the experimentation, for certain. So yeah, when it comes to these headdresses, there's been a lot of experimentation over the years, because we don't actually know for certain.
I I remember. What was not remember? I do find when we don't know how certain items of clothing historically are made. I find the process that is both fun and torturous is thinking, how do we go about this? Because
Yeah,
you have to find images that are, of course, from the period. You don't want something later because it very well may just be exaggeration, may just be not correct. And you see that a
yeah,
lot with a lot of different headwear, but
yeah.
just having to go through drawings, and sometimes if there's any like what's the word, like any, I want to like the word, I want to use the word like effigy, anything like
Records,
that. Yeah, records, like effigy, anything just that you can use to kind of look and think, what does this look like? uh and when even the hoods, they change a lot. The styles, like shapes, even like everything changes at some point. So even then you have to assert like what period, what point of certain time frame do you want to go for, when
right?
trying to assert when certain changes kind of happened. Obviously there's not
Yep,
going to be exact date, but kind of look at images, kind of be like, okay, this is when this happens, this is when like the veil does this, the hood does this, the shape goes like this and around this time, and then you kind of from there go and figure out, okay. And again, a lot of them, at least from what I've seen, a lot of the hoods were very much likely to be multiple layers
yeah,
put together, and
yep.
not one solid.
Right, not one solid. It's not like a hat,
Yeah,
right? It's not
it's
a
not.
single hat that you pop on and pop off. Like and for theater, like I totally understand why in a
Oh yeah,
movie or in theater you just want to make it all into one piece, but that's not
yeah,
how it actually was. And if you
yeah,
think about it, that just makes sense. I mean, it's the same for headdresses in the 15th century everywhere.
exactly.
It makes sense that you want to have these different separate pieces because then you can mix and match, right? Well,
Uh-huh.
today I want a different frontlet with my bonnet, and I don't want to wear a veil actually.
Uh-huh.
But if you just made it all as one thing, all three layers together,
Uh-huh.
bonnet, veil, and frontlet, then you're stuck with that forever, no matter what. And that makes no sense from the perspective of a modular wardrobe, and especially from the perspective of not everyone, not even wealthy people, can necessarily afford to have 20 different headdresses, but they can afford to have maybe 20 different
Yeah.
components and mix and match.
Hmm. That's I'm just gonna call back to I want to talk about the false sleeves and the false panels. That's
Mm,
like that. You might not have multiple curdles, but you can, like, you might not have like, a lot of curdles, but you can go, okay, well, if I just switch out this for a different one, it looks like I've put on something different, and that means you can look like you've changed as often as you want. Realistically, you
right,
can, and of course, the richer you are and sorting the laws are permitting, you can show off, your wealth
right.
through
Yep.
these minor accessories.
Yeah. So Atomic Force says the easiest to portray accurately would be clerics, I imagine. Well, um, you would think that, wouldn't you? But I don't. Twitchy, are you still there, or did you go to sleep? Um, actually, it depends on what you mean by clerics and what kind of cleric, because some clerics were actually wearing not just their clerical clothing, and they're getting slammed for it on a regular basis for going out in civies. I mean, so just like now, priests in the Catholic Church, they have a priest uniform, right? They've got all kinds of different garments and vestments that they wear for specific occasions when they're performing their duties, their duties in mass. But they also just have regular clothes to go out and about when they're not being a priest. So, there's a similar idea amongst many of the clergy in the Middle Ages. And also, even there, it seems that some of these members of the clergy want there to be some kind of change and evolution. Vestments change drastically, definitely, because new fabrics come out, or not necessarily the shape of the vestment, but the level of ornamentation of the vestments definitely changes over time. But I would say probably, portraying a cleric would be a less intensive level of effort than portraying a fashionable, nobleman or noblewoman. Yeah, just maybe not as easy as you might imagine, I think is my point. Yeah, it's a great comment. But you bring up a really great point, Mason, about imagery and art, and trying to find a contemporary image.
Mhm.
It can be really hard to find contemporary images of certain individuals, and I don't, because, and this is the problem, many copies are made of portraits of kings and queens and noblemen and noblewomen. And those copies are made post-mortem, or even way post-mortem, and they're made by people who don't understand the clothing that they're copying.
Yeah.
And so very often the copies are very inaccurate. So there's, I don't know how many copies of Elizabeth Woodville's, Queen Elizabeth Woodville's portrait. There's so many copies of her husband, Edward IV's portrait. And as far as I know, not a single one of them is the original contemporary portrait. All of them are 16th or 17th century copies. And all of them have incorporated their own understanding of fashion into them, meaning that none of these are probably an accurate, authentic representation of late 15th century royal clothing or noble clothing.
And then even that, if you can find like something written, you then have to figure out, okay, you have to visualize it then, and you have to try to figure out, okay, and if they don't list a material directly, they describe it and don't list a material. That happens a fair bit. It's just like, okay, what do I do now? I have to kind of go through. I don't remember her name. I think her name's Samantha. She was recreating a Tudor dress at one point, and it was Anne Boleyn dress specifically, and she was looking through records of just some purchases, and she found a listing of black fabric. She kind of went off two different kinds. I don't know if it was silk or something. I don't remember. It's been a while. But then she, has to go through, okay, what was likely to be, what can I realistically get, and what is most likely to be something that would be, there's not exactly specifics. You might get a good idea of what you're looking for, but no direct, mention, this is exactly what we're making this out of, okay?
Right. Yeah. So that is actually, that's funny, because that tendency in English and Scottish accounts, actually from the 15th century going forward, is very tedious. 14th century going forward, they actually say in these expense accounts, 4 quarters and an ache of black, and you're like, black what?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I suspect that when they do that, they mean wool. I think they don't mean silk. I think I've come to the conclusion, especially looking at the value that's ascribed to that. I think it's wool. I think it's wool, because when it's silk, they say silk. Yeah. They're perfectly capable of saying silk, but they almost never say wool. Almost never will they say wool. They say scarlet. They give the color, like 10 L's owns 10 L's of scarlet, 4 quarters of scarlet, 4 quarters of black, 4 quarters of blanket, right? So I have a feeling when they do that, I have a feeling it's wool. It's my suspicion is it's wool.
Probably.
It's frustrating though. It's like, really, you couldn't find it anywhere in your heart to just add the word wool.
I know. There's people like,
is it too much? Too much to ask. Just one more word, buddy. One more word.
It's just a few letters. Come on. Think about the people in the future. Come on.
Right. Seriously. Inconsiderate lout.
There's people like us who are going to need to know this. You can take the time to write an extra word or two. It's not going to kill you.
Apparently it did. Though.
It seems maybe that's what's happening. They're just all falling asleep before they can finish their sentences.
Yeah. So for those who are wondering, what we're talking about is using documentary evidence to research medieval clothing and understand the materials out of which they were actually made, because unlike starting in the 17th century, where we suddenly have lots of extant garments that have survived, 16th century actually has a lot more than the 15th century. The earlier you go, generally, the fewer actual garments we have. So we have to fill in the gaps about the materials out of which these clothing were made based on written records. Good night, Ursula. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so we have to look to these written records to figure out the kinds of materials out of which they were actually made. And even there, as we were just saying, very often they don't provide all the details. The clerics who are writing these accounts, these clerks who are writing these accounts, they're just not, they don't care that much. The most important thing is that there's a line item and there's an amount of value attached to it. And whether the most important thing there is whether it's going in or it's coming out.
Yeah.
You know, and just to imply, to put a quantity, but like the very, very specific nature of the thing may or may not be important, unfortunately. So, yeah.
While we're on the topic of records, like writings or different things, sometimes, we have people who are looking to get into recreating clothing or certain events and stuff. And I want to say this in case any of you are looking to do that. Always, I mean always, get as many sources as you possibly can and compare them. Because with a lot of events, you will notice that some people will add things that no one else will mention. Not always, but sometimes you want to, if it's a certain event that you're looking into and you want to find a good source, always compare your sources and just kind of figure out, because sometimes it does happen, there will be things that are added, or sometimes, depending on the event, there may be things that just aren't happening.
Yeah. So let me give you a good real example of that. A post I just made. I don't know if any of you saw the post I just made about the Bal des Ardents, the Dance of the Burning Men, the original Burning Man. Mason, did you happen to see that post?
I don't believe so, no.
Have you ever heard of the Bal des Ardents?
No.
Okay, the Dance of the Burning Men. So this is an example of a wedding celebration gone horribly wrong.
Oh.
In 1393, the King of France, Charles VI, and his lady wife and queen consort, Isabeau de Bavière, Isabeau of Bavaria, host a wedding for her lady-in-waiting, Catherine de Fontrévent. And her lady-in-waiting is a noblewoman. She's marrying one of the king's men, right, who's also a nobleman, because, kings and queens, their servants were nobility, not peasants, contrary to popular belief. Anyway, they're hosting this wedding. And typical medieval wedding celebrations involved dancing and feasting. But the dancing wasn't just social dancing, meaning the men and women getting up and dancing together. Dancing also in the Middle Ages in these specific formal occasions particularly involved entertainments where it was a group of costume performers dancing a specific dance for the entertainment of the audience, of the attendees, right? Kind of the precursor to ballet, but maybe much less refined than that in this era. And one of the most common motifs, the very popular motif in medieval Europe at this time is the motif of the wild man. Are you familiar with the concept of the medieval concept of wild men?
Not exactly, no.
So there was this, the medieval idea of geography was a little vague. So wild men were these primal humans who were all covered in hair, and they lived out in the wild, untamed places. They're basically undomesticated humans. You want to think of it that way. They're undomesticated humans. It's almost actually really, it's kind of like the medieval European version of Yeti. Really, if I think about it, now that I'm speaking aloud to you all about it. And so there was this idea that out there, somewhere in the wilds where no civilized person lives, there are these wild men and wild women. So it was a very common motif. It was a common concept. Edward III actually did a cosplay deed of arms in which he led, playing the role of Arthur, he led Arthur's knights to go in a deed against this group of wild men who were knights dressed like wild men. Right? So Charles VI, picking up on this very trendy, this hot TikTok dance trend of the 14th century, decides that he and 4 of his royal peers of France, by the way, are like the highest ranking nobles. So he and 4 of his royal peers are going to dress up like wild men, and they're going to perform a dance for the court. And they will be dressed in such a way that no one should know who they are, right? Because they're going to be completely covered from head to toe in a hair costume. And they're going to have masks, and they're going to have these beards that are going to make them look like they're bushy wild men. And so they Time comes, they dance into the court, and they're all tied together with a rope. They're all tied together with a rope because that's part of the performance. And in walks the Duke of Orleans. And the Duke of Orleans is the king's brother. And he's a bit of an ass. And he takes a torch and he decides he's going to use it to try to see, ostensibly, who are actually performing in the role of these wild men, because supposedly he doesn't know. This is according to Jean Froissart, who wrote the Chronicles of France, right? So we have to take this with a pinch of salt, because Froissart would not have wrote anything deleterious about the Duke of Orleans. But one of my followers pointed out he thinks the Duke of Orleans did this on purpose, because he was having an affair with the queen, and he was maybe hoping he could get rid of his brother and take over that spot as king, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, whatever his motivation, whether he's just being an idiot or an actually evil psychopath, Duke of Orleans holds a torch up close to one of them to try to get a better look. Their costumes are made of linen, covered in tow. Do you know what tow is?
No.
Tow is a part of the flax, right? When you're turning flax into linen, you get the nice linen fibers, but then you get this other material called tow. It's like a rougher version of linen, and it looks very hairy. It looks kind of straw-like a little bit, but hairy straw is probably the best way I would describe it. Okay. And so they've got a bodysuit, basically a onesie made of linen, and it is covered in tow that is affixed to the fabric with pitch. Do you know what pitch is?
I think I'm worried to know. I probably do, but not the term.
Pitch is a petrochemical. It's used in asphalt. Pitch is a petrochemical. It's used in asphalt, and it's used as the adhesive here. But it is highly flammable.
Yeah, so
highly, super flammable. Everything that they are wearing is super duper flammable. Super duper. So they've got a onesie made of linen, coated in pitch and covered in tow. And they've got a mask that's made in the same way, and it's a hooded mask. Like, we're talking completely encased. And here comes the Duke of Orleans with his torch, and he leans in, and one of them goes alight, and within seconds they are all alight because the flame just travels down the rope. And so they're all alight, they're all on fire. They try, of course, the people come to their aid. They try to break the ropes. They try to get the clothes off them. Then the knights who actually, according to the chronicler, Jean Froissart, the knights who actually try to loosen them from the ropes, they burn their hands badly because the flames are extra hot thanks to the pitch. And the king is on fire, right? The Duchess of Berry, who's the wife of one of the peers of France, but not one of the peers of France, who's on fire, thinks quickly. She smothers the king in the folds of her skirts. So she saves him. She extinguishes him. Talk about brilliant. Unfortunately, no one thought to do that for the other four. One of them jumps into the vat of water that was cooling the wine. For those who don't know, they used to have basically giant wooden buckets, and they put cool water in it, and you'd put a metal pitcher of wine in the water, and it would cool the wine through evaporative cooling. It's called a wine cooler. And he jumped into it to try to save himself. It didn't matter. 2 of them died that day of their burns. Two of them died several days later. The reason I bring this up as a reason to read multiple versions of the same account is because there is Jean Froissart's recounting, and it's alarming enough. And then there's another recounting by, God, I've forgotten what his name is, but he's a cleric. And so he has a jaundiced view about court frivolity anyway. And so he views this whole thing as God punishing them for being sinners. But he also goes into a lot more detail about what happens to the men who are on fire. And I mean, I don't even have those body parts, and I get a little queasy thinking about his description of what happens to them.
Oh.
So the two recountings they're the same, but they're very different, because this moralizing preacher also says that it's an angel who saves Charles, the king. Not the Duchess of Berry. No, an angel comes down and extinguishes the flames. Like, which was more likely, people? The Duchess of Berry smothering him in her ample skirts, or or this angel? I think we all know which is probably more likely.
Which is more likely, the Duchess thinking quickly, or just an angel slowly coming down? It's like, okay, I'm saving you.
Oh, yeah.
one of you will be saved, and the rest of you could just do whatever. I don't really care. I'm not here for you.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I'm not here for you. Anyway, yeah, this story is it's a horrible episode in history, and it unfortunately gets mistranslated as the ball of the burning men. But ball is a word that does a lot of thinking for us, right? And it's a mistranslation of the French word, which is bal, B-A-L. But bal doesn't mean ball like a big, in this context, doesn't mean a big dance, a party where you dance. Bal means dance, like an individual dance, an individual choreography. So it's really the dance of the burning men. It's not a ball where people came, because people imagine then everyone was in costume and wearing masks. And I hate to tell you all this, but the masquerade is not a medieval concept. What we imagine as a masquerade ball didn't happen in the Middle Ages. I have no evidence of such a thing ever happening, where all the guests just show up in costumes and or just masks and everyone dances. That's not a medieval thing. That's a modern thing. It's not even a Renaissance thing. That's a modern thing. So sadly, that's why the word masquerade also doesn't exist in this era. There's not even a word.
I was
and
going to...
Yeah, go on.
No, you go.
No. Absolutely.
No.
Your turn. Go.
What you have to say is certainly more important than what I was going to say.
I doubt it.
It was.
I was just going to say that a lot of people also confuse the word mask as a synonym for masquerade, M-A-S-Q-U-E. But a mask is not a masquerade. No. A masquerade is where everyone dresses up in costumes and wears masks, and there's a ball and it's a big gala affair, right? But a mask is a danced performance. Actually, the Bal des Ardents is a mask. It's a danced performance that is usually part of telling a story that glorifies the prince, capital P, right? So mask is also not a masquerade. Sorry, everyone. All of those who want a medieval masquerade ball, it's not a thing. That's an oxymoron, unfortunately.
But
okay, now what were you going to say?
What I was going to say, I was going to give an example why you should always get as many sources as you can, but I think you've given us a very grim one already, so I don't think there's anything...
Okay, wait. You don't have anything to add to that?
No. I was going to talk about my own experience, but no, I think that's example enough for why you should always...
check multiple sources.
Yeah. I was going to talk about when I was doing some research for something I planned to do. I didn't do it after, but I had to... I am very thankful for Claire Ridgway. I don't know what I'd do without Claire, because on her website, she has this list. It's links to like a bunch of sources about the execution of Anne Boleyn. Now, I originally planned to do a video about it. I didn't end up doing that video after, right? But I had planned to, and I did actually a project for my English class on different depictions of Anne Boleyn in film, and right. I had all of the sources listed at the end, and so I just kind of talked about like, what I'd rate them, how accurate they are, and like I'd have my sources there to talk about like the stuff about Anne. But right. When you look at the sources, some of you can, again with Anne, of course, specifically, there's biases everywhere, right? Anne is some people like her, some people really, really just want her gone, and every account is a little bit different.
She's polarizing, right? She's love her or hate her. She's an interesting lady, right?
Exactly. But there's like one source, and they talk about like her giving a separate speech to her ladies. That as far as I'm aware, there is no one else says that. Just one person said she stops, talks to her ladies, which if I'm mistaken. These weren't the same. These weren't the ladies who attended in the tower, if I'm not mistaken. These were different ladies entirely. Regardless, no one else seems to mention her ever giving a separate speech. And if there was, I feel like that would also be heavily documented. I'm sure you've heard the people recite a speech that didn't happen. The one where she's like, "The only fault of my death is Jane Seymour." Now that did not happen. If that happened, that would have been insane. First of all, and we wouldn't, I feel like we would know if that happened.
I'm pretty certain. Also, I almost feel like that wouldn't have been allowed to be documented, if you know what I mean.
But even then, I feel like even then, I feel like it'd either be fairly documented or not documented at all. So I don't think we're on either side of the spectrum for that. No, And there's another one.
Go on.
Sorry, there's another one that mentions her wearing a red kirtle, and that's the only mention of her
I've
wearing
heard
a
of
red
that.
kirtle. I was gonna go with that because I couldn't find it's been a while, but I couldn't find any other mention of her kirtle. We know she wore either like a gray or dark sort of dress. We know she had her cap, all that stuff. But I couldn't find anything about a kirtle. But I feel like if she wore a red kirtle specifically, that also I feel would have been fairly documented in itself.
It would have been. Red is one of the most expensive colors in this era, and it would have been a pretty stunning choice for the block, as it were.
You're going to death. I think that they would have recorded at least a little bit more than just one account. I feel like they would have said, something about, "Oh yeah, well, guess what she wore? You'll never believe this." I find sometimes, I don't remember how to say his name. Chipoy. I don't remember how to say his name. I think it was Chipoy. He was one of the ambassadors. I find a lot of times, if you,
Chipoy.
Chipoy. He doesn't like Anne, right? He does not like Anne. But
of course he doesn't. She's a Protestant heretic.
Exactly. If I'm mistaken, he was the ambassador to what's his name? Was it Charles? I believe.
Yeah. In that era, Charles. Yep.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, he was the nephew of.
He was Catherine of Aragon's nephew.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was the nephew of Catalina, but
yep.
He doesn't like her. And I find sometimes, though, if you compare like something that's said about her to something he wrote, I find sometimes that can help out because he doesn't like her. There are some things he writes, though. It's been a while since I've read like his writing, right? But he's still, although he is definitely biased against her, some stuff he writes, you can compare it to things you read and you can kind of decipher what may have, happened. I mean, he's reporting back stuff that's happening. Of course, he's not exactly for Anne, but sometimes that can help as well, I find.
Yeah, no, it is nice when we actually have multiple sources and we can compare them.
Is because you kind of decipher what is mostly bias, what is mostly fact. And of course, every source can have at least a little bit of bias, right? You're naturally going to be biased in some sense,
Well, yeah, history, and this is modern. Of course, we've been taught, misled, to believe that history is some kind of objective record of events, and it's not. And all of our sources for history, we have, not all of them. The sources for written history are written by biased humans who, no matter how objective they may try to be, they will have some kind of bias in the way they record events, whether they mean to or not. But beyond that, the recording of history, historiography has been intentionally biased because many chroniclers are writing for a leader, a potentate, a prince, a king, a queen, right? And they have to write this history in such a way that they don't end up on the wrong side of the ruler. So, you always have to take what you read with a grain of salt, and having, like you said, having multiple sources can really help. So we had a couple of good questions. I'll answer this one about Anne we'll answer this one about Anne, and then we'll go back to the masquerade question. So,
Okay.
Mason, did Anne really make those jokes about her neck?
The I have a little neck one. Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
think
say
so.
yes. She, from what I've read, yes. I can't give you a source at the moment. If you gave me like a bit of time, I'm sure I could. But the I have what was the quote? I believe. But I have but a little neck. I believe she said. Neck for
Yes,
execution.
it's something like that. Yeah.
Like yeah, I hear
Or
the
she.
executioner. I hear the executioner is something. I like some of the executioner, and she's. I have a little neck. If I'm not mistaken, she was of course being sarcastic. Was her neck, if I'm not mistaken, was also reportedly a bit long. Um, so that was kind of a. When it comes to Anne, too, you have to do a lot because what records do you have surviving? A lot of them, you have to compare it to some other stuff. Like I said, I will never escape the sixth finger thing.
Oh
No,
yeah.
no.
Oh my God! Did it? I'd forgotten about that.
Uh-huh.
Oh, oh, I haven't heard that in a while. I have not heard talk of her supposed six finger in a while. Oh my, so explain that for those who haven't maybe heard that
Yeah.
myth about Anne Boleyn.
There's this whole myth that Anne had a sixth finger on her hand. This didn't happen. This is not true. This is made up, if I'm mistaken, post mortem. Uh, she does not have a sixth finger. In my nightmares, I hear someone say that every little while. I'll just hear someone mention that, and I'm just like, she doesn't have a sixth finger. We aren't 100% sure. We are confident that when they did the renovations in the Victorian period of the Chapel of St. Peter at Vincula, they did skeletons, and we're pretty confident we know who Anne was, right? We have her buried under the plaque now. I say we as if I was there. They have her.
We as in humanity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not we. I wasn't there. I wish I was, but I wasn't. So, and there's a whole record. I want to try and find it again. I need to start keeping track of all my sources more. But there's one of the men who was working on the renovations actually wrote about it and described every bone they found. And she had the normal amount of fingers, the normal. You look at me. You got your five on each hand. She had 10 fingers in total. She did not have a secret sixth finger on her hand.
Oh my God, yeah. And so what is the significance? So do you know the significance of the six fingers? Why they keep trying to say she has six fingers?
I mean, it's abnormal, first of all, and I mean, there's the whole thing of her being doing. There's the whole people trying to say the whole witchcraft against the king,
Yep.
and
That's ding ding ding. They're trying,
yeah.
they've tried to paint her as having been a witch, right? And therefore if you have
Exactly.
one of the 16th century signs of being a witch, or the early modern signs of being a witch, was having extra digits.
I know.
Obviously.
In my head, all I can imagine is a conversation like oh wow, she has a sixth finger. Yeah, she's just a witch. She's just definitely a witch. Doesn't have one, but of course, I still hear people truthfully claim that she was a witch, and it's just like, no,
she was not a witch.
No.
Anne Boleyn was not a witch. Sorry, everyone. Sorry.
I think on my deathbed, all I'll hear is people saying these things, and I'll just be there, like crying out, like, no. It's just you can't escape it because there's so many rumors and myths about Anne Boleyn solidified into culture, even because something.
Well, they
crazy.
get incorporated into television shows and movies, or
Exactly.
they become the entire plot point of a television show or movie. And so, again, this brings us full circle into the death of Robin Hood, and why the depiction of accurate history, both in terms of events, but also in terms of the material culture and the clothing, why it matters. Because for most people, their history teachers, the ones whose lessons they'll remember, are not the teachers they had in school. It's Hollywood movies, it's Netflix shows, it's video games, right? Those are the history teachers for most people. And so if they are teaching incorrect information, then people's understanding of history is wrong. And that has knock-on effects that are much bigger than people can imagine. So it is important that we depict these things. Okay, so we had another question actually about the masquerade.
Right.
So we were talking about masquerades not really being a medieval concept, and I think it was Tommy Core who actually made a very good comment. He said, "What? Not even in Venice did they have masquerades." So the word masquerade very specifically has the definition of a ball with dancing in which people are wearing masks and or costumes. No, that kind of event did not exist even in Venice. However, medieval people did wear masks at specific times of year and engage in shenanigans. But it's not like an event, like a formal event with a ball where people are wearing masks and costumes. But they didn't just do it in Venice. It wasn't just in Venice. This was something that was done like everywhere at certain seasons of the year in the Middle Ages because it was part of the off-letting of steam. But they didn't have like nice formal balls where everyone gathers in this ballroom and everyone's wearing this, these fancy dress costumes and masks. That's not a medieval thing. That's like a Baroque era thing going into it's a modern era thing. So no, not even in Venice did they do that because that just wasn't a thing that was done. Big balls happening in these big ballrooms is also more of a very late medieval thing. Because that's when they start getting these really large spaces, but even then they just didn't do masks. And you know why? Do you know why no one really wants to dance in a mask? Mason, do you know why it's uncomfortable to dance in a mask?
Um,
Can you imagine why? Have you ever worn a mask just regularly for any length of time?
I have, yeah. It is kind of just, it's hard to see sometimes. I can say that, depending on,
Hard to
it
see?
can be,
Yeah.
it can
Yeah.
obstruct your vision.
It can?
I
Yeah.
had one. There was one I had. I don't know where it went, but it can obstruct your vision. And I imagine if you're dancing, you probably want to be able to see.
You do.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you do.
I'd assume. I'd assume.
You do. Ding, 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 ding. Part one of why it's not really comfortable to wear a mask when you're dancing. Part two, dancing is an activity that can result in the excretion of liquid from your skin known as sweat.
Right.
And if you're wearing a mask, then the sweat just builds up under the mask. And it is
Yeah.
the most uncomfortable, horrible thing you can imagine. So because I have attended events hosted by medievalist recreation organizations that did involve a ball with a mask. At the time, I was a teenager and I didn't realize that was a complete anachronism, but I've still done it. And it was not nice, not pleasant. Have the sweat just kind of, and it runs into your eyes and no. So the romance of a masked ball it's wonderful until you actually dance. And if you dance for any length of time. Yeah. So yeah, that's the answer to the mask question. Masquerade. It's this idea of a masquerade is a large ball, a dance where everyone's in costumes and masks and everyone is dancing. That's not the medieval concept. They had the kinds of masquerades that they had were the ones that I described, where a small troupe of usually members of the court of the nobility would actually dress up and perform a specific dance for a discrete period of time, not that everyone was in costumes and masquerading. And then have you ever heard of the any other in Tudor England perhaps times of year when people would wear masks and just take to the streets and be crazy?
Christmas time, if I'm mistaken, was a time of things like that. I don't know so much about Easter, but I do know Christmas time was big. I remember I did a video about Christmas in the Tudor period.
Yep.
And I remember it well because I remember it was at the time where every idea I had, Claire Ridgely would do it the next day, and I was like, why am I bugged? She has microphones in here. I promise you, she's like got microphones in here somewhere, I'm sure of it. Since I did that interview, she's listening to me, I'm sure. But I remember it, and I remember looking into it. I was, not, I don't want to say shocked. Not much can really shock me about them anymore. But I thought that was kind of, cool of like some of the stuff that they did. They had a lot of traditions, right? But that would certainly be one time you would do something like that because it's
Yep.
festivity.
Yep. Yeah. So this is going to shock many of you. Christmas in not just in Tudor England, across Europe, was a crazy party. It was 12 days of hedonism. 12 days of hedonism. It was for everyone, all across all levels of society. No one worked. Everyone had off for all of Christmas. There was no work happening during the Christmas season. And yeah, one of the things people would do is actually wear masks and take to the streets. And it was just it was one of the ways in which people could let off steam.
Yeah.
And yeah, so do you remember some of the traditions that from Tudor Christmas?
I remember I don't remember what they called it, but who was a choir boy would be selected.
Yep.
I don't remember what the term was.
The boy bishop. The boy bishop. Are you talking about the boy bishop? Yeah, the boy bishop.
I believe so. What else? There was a lot.
Well, could you explain the boy bishop? Because most people probably haven't heard of the boy bishops unless they're from England, where I think they still do it sometimes.
True. How do I? A boy is chosen, right?
Mm-hmm.
To where they preside over like certain. First of all, preside over certain ceremonies, different things. I mean, I feel like the name kind of self-explanatory in that part. Boy bishop, because
But do you know the things he actually did? Could you give some examples of things the boy bishop would actually do?
It's been a minute. I don't think I can off the top of my head. No.
Okay, so the boy bishops would basically they would actually hold mass, but like a topsy-turvy version of mass. Yes. Right. So they would basically go through a mockery of the motions of being a bishop. Yeah. And it was a way again to let off steam, right? For the rest of the year, there's things are very serious. Everyone has their place in the hierarchy, but at Christmas that was all tossed out. Nevis, there we go. Nevis is on. Yeah, see, I knew there'd be people who hadn't heard of the boy bishop. Yep. Oh God, I missed a whole bunch of comments. Sorry about that, guys. A whole bunch of comments just popped through all at once, as they tend to. Yeah. So yeah, the boy bishop was, one of these aspects of this 12-day period of hedonism. And do you remember any other Tudor Christmas traditions?
That's the one that stuck out most in my mind.
Well, so what basically there would be feasting and dancing. There would be a Lord of Misrule might be appointed at the grown-up level, which is someone who is not an aristocrat, who would basically become like an aristocrat, a nobleman for a day, and would get to basically lead chaos, turning everything on its head. So yeah, Christmas was a time where people might wear masks. But again, no masquerade as such, no formal ball where everyone is in masks and dancing together. It's just not a medieval concept. Yep. Yeah. The steam aspect was a lot of the rationale behind the Venetian masquerade as well. But again, remember, masquerade as a danced ball is not a medieval concept. But the thing is, it's just Venice is one of the places that continued that tradition for the longest. And it died. The tradition of Carnevale in Venice died. Venice specifically brought it back in the 70s, I think, or the 80s even, as a way to increase tourism to the city. So that tradition died. It's not a continuous tradition, even in Venice. It's just one of the places where it continued the longest because the Reformation happened. And in a lot of places, that meant that those medieval traditions of Christmas celebrations were abolished because that was papist hedonism and heathenism, right? So you're not going to do that. It's too Catholic. And the Puritans. Yeah, exactly. And the Puritans, you're going to say, well, the Tudors weren't Catholic anymore. You're right. But the English church in the 16th century was kind of like Catholic light
It
with
was.
English, with English as the language of
Yeah.
the mass. But do you know when in England and actually in the Americas, therefore, that Christmas tradition died forever, basically, that raucous version of Christmas died?
Uh,
Who was it that killed it?
is it far stretch to accuse Cromwell?
Oh, it is
Or is
not.
it?
It is not far stretched. You would be spot on. Cromwell. Cromwell abolished Christmas. All
Yeah,
of
he did.
Christmas. The war
I
on
have
Christmas was by a Christian, everyone, to be clear.
yeah. I have
On a pious Christian, no less.
I have a very deep emotion against Oliver Cromwell, and it is purely hate.
Yeah.
Hatred. The deepest part of my soul.
He has so much to answer for. So much to answer for. None of it good.
I know.
Yeah, so it was
Sometimes
Cromwell. Cromwell canceled Christmas, literally. And after
what
the
didn't he cancel?
Puritans, yeah, right. Seriously, he canceled Ireland. he can he he canceled the king.
Yeah.
But apparently after when Charles II was restored, he briefly considered bringing those celebrations back, but he decided maybe not to rock the boat too much, and so
No.
Christmas celebrations thereafter were just much more intimate and family oriented, and never went back to the old hedonistic celebrations of yore. So that's kind of why
Yeah.
we have our modern family Christmas now.
Charles II is also someone I have a bit of a soft spot for. Sometime I should probably get my costume I wear for my. I don't do anything for Charles anymore, but I do have the wig still. I had this whole outfit for Charles II.
Nice.
But
Yeah, those
we're
wigs are
off topic
great.
there.
Yeah, those wigs are great. Yeah, let me see. Last night, my Maronite church had a celebration, and they were dancing the dapka, an ancient dance meaning stop. Oh, I hate. Ugh. Stomping of the feet. So amazing. Oh yeah. So okay, ancient guys. Now I'm gonna have to put the kibosh on the idea that that dance is necessarily ancient. Okay. So here's the thing, guys. Folk dance is mutable. By which I mean, folk traditions are all very mutable. Until recently, where they've been petrified. But historically, folk dance and folk music and folk clothing is more likely to change and evolve than court music, clothing, and dance is, because court dances tend to be part of a ritual, a very protocolistic, highly regulated, highly regimented set of rituals. Court music as well. It has to abide by certain expectations, certain strictures, certain aesthetics, right? Whereas folk traditions, as such, are not subject to any of that. And so they are more likely to evolve. So just because a song is being sung in the 19th century doesn't mean that song was being sung in the 16th century, or a song with the same title looked the same as it did in the 16th century, or sounded the same as it did in the 16th century. Same thing for dance. There are a lot of dances where the name is the same across the centuries. I'm talking folk dance as well, and folk music. But if you actually go back and look at the kind of instruments that people historically had, and the kind of clothing people have worn that has changed over time, and the kind of spaces in which they danced, that changes, and that impacts a dance. So for example, the dapke might be a dance that there's been a dance called that for 2,000 years, perhaps. Unlikely that it would have that name for 2,000 years, but maybe. But that doesn't mean that it's the same thing. And even if it's simple, it doesn't mean that it's the same thing. The music could have changed. Instruments get introduced all the time. When the Ottomans invaded the Eastern Mediterranean and spread their wings across the Balkans, for instance, they introduced a lot of new instruments that hadn't existed in the Balkans before. And there's also been innovation in instrumentation over time as well. And when a new instrument is invented and taken up by the people, there's new kinds of music they can play on that instrument. And so music changes. So never ever assume that a dance stays unchanged over time, even if someone calls it an ancient dance, or even if someone calls it, especially if they use the word folk dance. My experience with folk traditions is that they are more likely to change than court traditions are for that reason. Yeah. But it's pretty cool that you did a dance, no matter what. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I never take it for granted that a dance stays unchanged. It could, but unless I have actual documentation describing the dance from that place, then I don't believe it, because I've been burned many times. Many times. I'll give you a good example. The Saltarello in Italy is still a folk dance that is danced to this day. The Saltarello comes from the Middle Ages. The medieval Saltarello music and the medieval Saltarello dance have almost no overlap with the thing that's being danced modernly. But it's a traditional folk dance. So just saying, it's and it's simple. The modern one is simple too. The medieval one was simple, but it's changed. So I never trust it. Never call it, just call it a traditional dance. But unless you actually have documentation, like primary source documentation, I would very much hesitate to call it an ancient dance. Yeah. That's just my little lecture on folk dance and folk music. It's a topic very near and dear to my heart. Because it gets misinterpreted all the time. And people then use it as a reason to use these dances at medieval events. It's like, but we know things about actual medieval dances. We don't need to backdate a modern folk dance so you can dance it at your medieval event. We can just do the medieval dance. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just never trust. Folk does not equal ancient. Simple doesn't even equal ancient. It might, but it doesn't necessarily, is my point. Yeah. So have you done any dancing of any kind, Mason? Historical, modern, folk, ballroom, anything?
I'm trying to learn some, what was it called? I've been trying to learn a few dances. Do you know David Smith? Do you know? I think his name's David Smith. I should know this. I know him. David Smith.
No, yeah. I don't know who that is offhand. Anyway.
He's also Henry VIII. He also does things Henry VIII. He's on. You might know him, Sir Loyalheart is what you might know him as. He does a young Henry
VIII. I do
VIII.
not.
Okay, well, he's on Facebook. He's on TikTok. He does all that stuff. He does stuff as Henry.
Yeah. Too. So the reality is that I don't have time to actually read Facebook. No. I spend my whole day creating. I don't follow. I really don't generally have time to follow other people.
Oh yeah. But just in case anyone out there does want to check him out, I do want to mention him because I did an interview with him and it didn't record. I was devastated. But we're here to talk about that. He recommended me some dances to learn, and I've been now the weather's getting warmer. I'm hoping to practice a few soon. It's kind of hard to do it in the winter with a limited space in the apartment.
Practice. Did you say fume?
No, practice. No, I said just practice where the weather is.
Okay. Nothing. Not a specific dance. No. Got it. What kind of so interesting. So most people who claim to do Henry VIII dances aren't doing Henry VIII dances.
No.
They're usually doing much later stuff. So what kind of dances is he?
I don't remember how. I don't know how to pronounce it. Hang on, I gotta check how to pronounce it because I'm probably gonna. No,
Pavon?
I don't think it's necessary. Yes,
Pavon.
Yeah, I was scared to butcher that pronunciation.
Oh really? Oh, good. Pavon. Yeah, the Pavon.
Yeah.
I'd be interested what choreography he's using. So we have a few, there's from the time of Henry VIII, there is one written French source from the actual time of Henry VIII. There's no English sources. Well, there's a translation of a French source that doesn't talk about pavans, that is Henry VIII. So honestly, as Henry VIII, you should be doing bastons, actually more likely than pavans, which are
'Cause
definitely documentable to England in this era.
I texted him. I texted him. I was like, "What's an easy dance that was around in this period I could learn?" And I mean, he's done it before too for some things. So I was just like, "What's something easy to start off?"
Yeah.
Because, you know, but yeah,
Yeah, pavans are super boring. Like
yeah,
I hate pavans. It's the most dull thing ever. It's proof that the English were definitely boring in the 16th
yeah.
century.
I remember I just tried to do it. I remember, and I was just like, "Why is who is willingly doing this?"
Yeah. So
I think I'd rather.
the interesting thing is that later in the 16th century, pavans in Italy and Spain and a little bit in France get very complicated, like with very long, with ornate choreographies and Galliard steps and like really complex. Meanwhile, back in England, they're still just doing single, single, double,
Yeah,
single, single, double, single, single, double. It's the reason for it. The only thing I can think of is that it was just used as a processional way of opening a dance, and that it was maybe not something that was done very often. I think you would more likely enjoy the bus dance would be what I would suggest, which is like a pavan but interesting and in 6/4, the meter of 6/4 instead of the meter of 4/4 or compound 6/8. So 6/4 music has a nice sway to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. It's got this really nice sway to it, and then you've got these really lovely steps that you can do over top of that music. I actually have a video on 16th century bas dance. I think it's public. It might not be public. It might be something I made available only to my patrons.
I find it kind of funny you mentioned that because the reason I found your channel in the first place was trying to find some dances, and you had a video, and that was actually how that's what brought us to this point.
That's what
Of
brought us to this point.
it is that was the first video that I watched, and that's why we're here. We are today with me here.
We also know, I know that in England in the time of Henry VIII, there were dancing brawls. What I don't know is whether Henry was. I haven't looked into dancing specifically at the court, Henry's court, in a long time. I don't remember seeing mention of brawls, which are also more interesting than than what's her name? Than pavans are. I mean, to be frank, watching grass grow is more interesting than a pavan, because at least if I'm watching grass grow, it means I'm in a beautiful green field, and it's like contemplative and meditative.
I think it's funny you say that because I was going to say a few minutes ago I think I'd rather watch paint dry than do it again.
Yep. It's really, no, I don't recommend the pavan. I recommend a bas dance. And yeah, there's a whole source. There's this Englishman by the name of Copeland basically translated in the 1420s or 30s, translated a French dance source and it was printed. And so we know that at least in England, this book with dances was being published and bought. And so it's entirely possible that these dances, it's likely, therefore, that these dances were actually being done. Because why would you buy a book about dance that's a dance manual if you're not going to do the dances in it? It's not interesting otherwise. So yeah, I recommend the bas dance for you. I'll see if I can find you a bas dance video, because yeah, the pavan would make anyone hate life.
Oh yeah, yeah. There are so many things that you could do with your time that would be so much more productive
And more interesting.
and give you joy and hope in life.
I would rather file my nails than dance a pavan.
Yeah, I think I'd rather do pretty much anything. It was easy and it was just sad. It's just like
it's a joyless dance. It's a joyless dance. It's no. I've tried to figure out where it comes from, because they do have in Europe, all across Europe, they have this processional, this dance that is, for a line of dancers, basically called the bas dance or the bassa danza.
yeah.
And it's done to the 6/4, like I said, and it's beautiful. And there's really complex ones with really gorgeous choreography. There's dance choreographies for 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, right? Beautiful, beautiful dance. There's even one that's, I call the 15th century party line dance, because it is really, it's like the 15th century line dance, except people are lined up one behind the other, just all doing exactly the same thing. And it's just a fun thing to do together as a group. And that's super interesting because it has all these changes of direction and moving sideways and diagonally and around. And, like, that's fun because you're moving together to this really neat music. The pavan. Dances probably evolve like languages over time. Yes, that is a great comment. Yes, dances absolutely evolve just like languages over time. Mason, can you think of some of the things that might cause dances to evolve? Like one of the most important things that might cause a dance to change and evolve? Something that you're very interested in, and I'm very interested in.
I feel like I'm not gonna get it. I feel like I'm not. Clothing.
Yes. Yes. How can you imagine that clothing might cause a dance to change and evolve over time?
I mean, as clothing evolves over time, as clothing itself evolves, you're going to have to adjust your dances to fit with your clothing.
Yes.
If you cannot do something that was made for clothing you cannot wear. And I don't think you want to wear something out of date just for the sake of a little dance. No.
Yep.
You have to update. You are going to update it. You will change things. Be like, hey, look what I'm doing. Now you can all do it too. Yay.
Yep. New clothing means new ways of moving your body.
Exactly.
Right. And that could be more restrictive, so you can do fewer things, or more freedom. You can do more things. Or depending on your skirts, if they drag on the ground, then you're going to want dances that frame your dress, your garments to the maximum, that take advantage of garments that drag on the ground. Whereas if your garments drag on the ground, then you're not going to want to do dances where that becomes a complexity. So yeah, absolutely. Another thing that can cause dances to change is changes in music.
Yes.
So as music changes, as music innovates, as new rhythms, new phrasings are invented, dances change to fit that. You're like, suddenly music is being played in 3/4, and you're like, ooh, 3/4, I can do different things with my feet than I could do before. So, the clothing and music are the 2 biggest drivers of changes in dance. It's absolutely massive. And it's one of the reasons that if I'm at a multi-period event, and they're doing, say, English country dance, but I'm wearing 15th century Burgundian clothing with a long train and a tall steepled headdress, I have zero interest in doing an English country dance, because they are designed. English country dance comes about in the 17th century, and they're designed for 17th century clothes. And envision women's clothing in the 17th century in the court of, Charles I, Charles II, right? You've got these lots of structure to your skirts. They're being supported by all kinds of farthingales and petticoats and bustle or bumbrels, right? You've got pairs of bodies keeping your body in a certain way, and your garments do not drag on the ground. There's no long trains, and you don't have tall headdresses with veils coming off of them, right? So that's not like Burgundian clothing. Burgundian clothing has a lot of contact with the ground. And so dancing an English country dance in Burgundian clothing is one of the most unpleasant dance experiences ever. So I just won't do it. It doesn't interest me. It does not move well. It doesn't feel fun. So yeah, some people think I'm a English country dance snob, meaning I just don't like English country dance. No, it's because I'm generally never wearing 17th century clothing. So 17th century dances don't move right if you're not wearing the right kind of clothes. Yeah. But yeah, if you're interested in learning some more interesting Henrikian dances, I'll see if I can find that Bossa Danza video for you.
Thank you. I think I'd rather stare at a wall for a day than
Pavan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry he did that to you.
I mean, I guess he didn't lie. It's not hard to do. It's just,
No,
it's not. I mean, I never said it had to be fun, so that's on me.
that's on me. Maybe so next time, simple but fun. Will definitely the second filter will eliminate Pavan from the search results.
I remember I'd be out in the backyard and I'd just be like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, it's a question. It's a question I, as a dance master, as a dance researcher and reconstructor of 30 years of experience, still ask myself why.
It's just
Why?
sometimes you gotta,
Just
you know,
why?
take a moment and consider everything you're doing and think, is this worth it?
Yeah, and it's like I said, in Italy, in Spain, in France, the pavane is not that. There's a nice, or well, actually, no, that's not true. France has imported one of the complicated pavanes from Spain, but the French pavane is also boring. So Spain and Italy, they have interesting pavanes, but apparently the English want their traditional in quotes because it's not a very old dance. They want it to be nice and plain and simple. And I don't know, that might, honestly, it might have something to do with Henry himself. It might have to do with his health. The boring English pavane might be a consequence of Henry not being able to do any of the dances of his sprightlier years. Now that I say that all aloud. So what's France's excuse? I don't know what France's excuse is.
I'm sure there's one somewhere.
So actually, France's excuse is that we don't really have many court documents about court dancing from the 16th century. We have two sources for dance in 16th century France, that of which I'm aware. One of them was written by a man whose pseudonym is Arena, and he's a law student. Yes, you heard me right. He's a law student. And among the several interesting treatises he writes a dance manual. And his dance manual, I don't think, has any pavanes. It's got bastons in it. It's got lots of bastons in it. It has some brawls in it. The problem with his dance manual is that it's never been translated entirely, and it's written in a macaronic Latin. So it's it's not necessarily the most intuitive language to translate out of, because macaronic Latin is a Latin that's kind of been mixed with the local language and doesn't necessarily actually follow any of the actual Latin rules. So yeah, there's not, I don't think there's an actual translation of his work in its entirety anywhere. And he's writing in the 1520s.
Okay.
He's also pretty funny because he's a law student, and he actually provides some really funny information in his treatise. He's because his treatise is also kind of a lark. Like, it's written like a dance manual, but you can tell it's not supposed to be taken seriously. So I don't know why this guy had so much time on his hands to be writing a lark of a dance manual that isn't supposed to be taken seriously. But he talks about apparently an actual lawsuit that happened about dance in the 1520s in France. So these bastons that I was talking about, the music wasn't necessarily specific, which means you wouldn't necessarily be able to remember the dance just by listening to the music. So a friend of his paid the musicians to play a specific song, like his favorite bastons, and he was trying to impress a girl, right, a woman. And so he leads the lady out to the floor, and they're dancing this dance. Meanwhile, his jackass, excuse my language, but that's what they were, his jackass his law student friends have bribed the musicians to play different music, not the right music for the dance. And apparently they specifically chose music that was too short. So the musicians stopped playing in the middle of the dance. And so he's left in the middle of the floor, standing in the middle of the floor like an idiot with this lady. And he looks like a moron because he didn't do the right dance. And so he actually sues his friends for defamation and malicious humiliation in the civil courts, which is why we know about this case. But the point is that from a dance perspective, it's interesting because it means that there wasn't necessarily a set piece of music to go with these dances. The music just had to be the right length. So yeah, that can be a little frustrating. Oh, Unsol. Hello, Annyeong. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to, oh yeah, by the way, everyone, if you're enjoying this rant about medieval and Renaissance dance, then double tap that screen and consider subscribing.
Yes.
I got so into sewing and chatting that I completely lost track of that. Yeah.
I mean, it's fair. These live streams go everywhere, you know.
They really do. They really do.
It's worth
Well,
it though.
are you working on any projects? I don't mean like right this moment, but sort of in
No.
general.
Not at the moment. I've got some other projects that aren't history related, which is shocking. You know, that's not like me, but I do have other things. There's nothing history related at the moment. I'm hoping to get some more projects now that I have, 2 months off. Is just, figure out stuff to do. Because plus now I can do more of these live streams. So even then I have more things I can do and talk about during these. But
It's true.
I'm hoping to get a few ideas for some projects.
Well, let me see, what garments do you need? Does your ensemble require to oh yes, he did win the case. Nevis, he won the case. He did.
I mean,
his friends had to pay a fine, right? I mean, it was, yeah, his friends basically had to pay him.
I think we were all wondering.
Yeah, he did. He won damages. I don't remember how much. Defamation over dance. The world's a fascinating place, isn't it? Anyway, what kinds of pieces does your ensemble require to be more complete? That's where I would start looking for.
Sorry, 1 second. My headphones came out a little bit. Oh, I didn't hear your full sentence.
Oh yeah. So what pieces does your ensemble require to be more complete? That's how I would decide what to make next.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I necessarily need.
I mean, need is a strong word. I mean, okay, so the last time we did a getting dressed, I distinctly recall you saying, I don't have the right version of this thing. Was it hosen? Was it
no?
Niederhosen, your lower hosen? Or was it a bonnet? Was it a coif or a bonnet? Trying to remember. There was something.
I think it was. I don't remember. I know what you're saying. I remember saying it. Now that you mention it, I don't remember what it was.
What was it? Damn it! That's what you need. You need that thing. Go back and watch that live stream.
The thing. I'll just scroll back and I'll just watch it, and I'll just kind of figure out what I have to do. Okay,
I have a couple of pieces that I'd like to make a collecto, which is the almost transparent sort of neck décolletage covering that women in France and Italy and England wore in this era. I need to make one of those. I've been wanting to make one of those for a while. I need to make a 15th century Florentine style kerchief rather than just cheating and wearing this one for everything, because this is not really a style that was seen in Florence as far as I can tell. But before that, I've got bigger, like literally bigger fish to fry. I've got the 2-week medieval living history event coming up at the end of July. Penzik, you would love Penzik, Mason. You should look up Penzik. You can. I have a whole Penzik playlist. You can go check out. You can go get Penzik through the Contessa's eyes if you want. But there's like 8 hours. There's hundreds of classes taught every day on a variety of medieval and Renaissance living history topics from all across the world. Some of them are actually PhD professors, a lot of independent researchers sharing their latest research, whole costuming tracks. There's, medieval martial arts, a variety of kinds. There's a huge market with over 200 vendors, about 10% of whom are selling actually medieval things. Actually, 10% is a little bit of an understatement, maybe 25%. It's not just, it's a medieval fair or medieval festival,
Okay.
I guess is probably the best way I would describe it. It's run by the Society for Creative Anachronism, and it attracts a lot of different groups though. Some whom are there for just the party, many who are there for the more medieval living history side. So check it out, Pensic, PENNSIC. It's in Western Pennsylvania. You can't go on your own. So you'd have to have a parent who'd be willing to take you, but it is a in garb event, so you would need enough clothing to get you through however long you decide to go for. But just for the classes alone, you would probably want to go. They have a whole university sub department of the event, Pensic University. You can check out their class list from, I think they've published the one for this year already, but there are literally probably 200 classes a day on a huge array of topics pertinent to medieval history and medieval living history, like everything from hands-on how to make 10th century wooden furniture using 10th century implements to, Plato and his impact on Christianity in the Middle Ages, right? Like huge array of topics. Deserved.
I wish there were more local. I wish for me that there were more local things, but no one here does anything fun.
Is there no local branch of the SCA where you are?
No. We did have a reenactment thing here, but they don't do it anymore. I think you were in that group actually. I remember I found the Facebook group. It was for here, and you were in it. And the most recent post was from like 2023, and it was you sharing something you had on YouTube.
Oh, you sure they're not active anymore? They just might not be active on Facebook. Oh, you reached out? I'm sorry.
Someone actually asked the group, like, is this like, are you guys still doing this stuff? And they said, no, this doesn't happen. No one on this island does anything fun.
Oh, I'm sorry, kid.
It's sad. No one here has any fun. I mean, we do have, the closest we get to anything at all is our local Renaissance fair. That's not much at all. We don't get anything fun.
I mean, to be fair, most Renaissance fairs these days are not even vaguely Renaissance. I'm not even talking about like authentic Renaissance. I mean, like they're mostly pirate and fairy and mermaid fairs now. It's not even trying to be Renaissance anymore. In fact, a lot of fairs in the US have stopped calling themselves Renaissance fairs and just call themselves fair. Right. So like it's the Pennsylvania Fair. And then they might have one weekend out of their 6 weeks of season where it's actually a Renaissance theme. But then the other weekends are pirates and fairies and mermaids or something like that.
I still go anyway, because you know what? It's the closest I get to finding people who do similar stuff.
Absolutely.
There was one woman in her family I met there, and she actually made a dress. It was a Tudor style dress, and I really liked that. She's actually given me one of the French hoods she made, and I'm really excited. I really liked it. She made it.
That's really cool. That's cool. I love that.
I wish I had a photo of like just the outfit, but it was really, really good. But no one on this island does anything fun. If they do, it's like museum work, and I mean, I do it, but it's nowhere near where I live because it never could be. There's nothing fun here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've reached out to my local museums. They just don't answer me, and it's like I'm not surprised. But I will judge you. I'm judging. I'm judging them all.
I'm not surprised, but I'm disapproving. Yeah.
Like I'd be surprised if they answered me. On the other hand, it's like you still should be answering me. Come on, guys.
Are you on Prince Edward Island? Is that where you are?
Newfoundland.
Oh, you're talking about the whole province. Okay.
Yeah. If there is anything, it's always like somewhere far out.
Okay. Yeah.
It's on the other side of the island at best, and it's I'm not going there. I'm not going there for something I can do for like a day.
I've never heard anyone refer to Newfoundland as the island. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. We just call it, everyone here, we just call it that because I mean, yeah, for us it is the island.
That's good to know. That's why I was like, what island are you on? Okay, you mean the whole province. Got it. Yeah, it's hard to be isolated. Growing up now, granted, you're talking about a whole province. I lived in lower Delaware, which is it looks like it's surrounded by lots, but it's not easy to get from Lower Delaware out of Lower Delaware to the other places because of the way the roads are and the bridges are and the waterways are. So when I found medieval, the SCA, a medieval recreationist group, I was the only person in my area. The next closest people were an hour and a half away in the north of the state. So all of the activities were an hour and a half away. And as a 14-year-old with, no license, because you can't have a license at 14, that meant that I had to rely on, my dad or my mom or friends' parents to be generous enough to drive me to those functions. So it was very frustrating. Of course, now I'm certain you would probably kill for something that's an hour and a half away from you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just some things are just, they'll have it. I'll see it online. I'll be like, why can't you just be a little bit closer? Because it's always museum work. It's always like at a museum, but like I would do that. But it's just never close. And it's just, the closest museum to me doesn't really do anything fun. If they do, it's just like whatever. I mean, they might have someone coming to talk every little while, but that's about the much fun we get.
So when I was your age, I thought, I didn't know there were living history groups. Medieval. I reenact, Rev War and Civ War all around me. I didn't know there were medieval groups. And I thought I was going to actually have to start my own. So have you considered, putting out, getting on maybe one of the local like Facebook community groups for your area and see if there might be anyone interested in, creating your own club?
I've been debating it because at this point, I'm sure there's someone else out there who's like, why isn't anyone doing anything?
Right. So, I mean, that's if I were in your shoes, that is what I would do.
I've been thinking about it because at this point, it's just like, I don't want to say that I'm going insane, but sometimes it's just like, come on. There's a good chunk of people on this island. I think someone out there must be looking for something like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry that the SCA group where you are died. I wonder maybe everyone moved away or something. Yeah.
I think
one of the comments was maybe the actors in the Ren Fair. Does the Ren Fair, your little Ren Fair, do they have actual actors who are performers?
They do. They don't do much like historical stuff. They have them like do like fights and stuff. I mean, it's fun to watch, but they don't do anything.
But they might be the kind of people who would be interested in it. Fair. The question is, if they're local, i.e. on your island, then maybe they might be people to actually reach out to and say, hey, I would like to do something a little more historical, some, the fun parts of this era. Would you be interested in joining me in this endeavor? And also the thing you need to think about is, what would you like that to look like? Do you want this to just be a research group, a research club, or do you want it to be more living history where you guys are like recreating the feasts and the dancing and the clothing, and the games and the social aspect and the music, right? Things to think about.
Yeah. And the thing is here too, I feel like one thing that would definitely get a fair bit of attention because people love it. A lot of people are interested in it. Like everywhere people are interested. When it comes to both World War I and World War II, that is where you would find a good spot because lots of people I know would kill for something like that because on this island, I mean, there's a lot of history with Newfoundland and the war. I mean, I have some stuff from the war right next to me right now, actually.
Right. Yeah.
But that's really the thing that most people are interested in. I feel like if it was something along that lines, people would certainly be interested. But the farther back you go, it's the less people are on this around are like. I mean, they find it cool. I mean, I've had people like talk to me about like what I do, but none of them. There's not as many interested in the stuff I do as much as they will be something more recent. If that makes sense.
Well, maybe in terms of mass numbers, but you never know until you actually like put feelers out.
Fair. That is fair.
How many closet geeks are waiting to come out of the closet with get their medieval or Tudor or Renaissance nerd on, right? They're just waiting for the opportunity. I will tell you, I will just warn you that people who are generally interested in medieval and or Renaissance living history tend to be introverts, so you might have to go and find them.
Oh, don't worry.
Uh,
I'm aware. It's very
yeah,
common.
yeah. It's unlike the medieval people they're
Uh-huh.
seeking to emulate who couldn't be introverts. They are.
There's no judging for me though. I'm not judging. It's just
Yeah,
you gotta look. You gotta look for them.
exactly. You have to go and draw them out,
Yeah,
basically. But I
you
think,
have to find them, and they yeah.
but I think if you go on, see, Discord is very bad for this, but if you go on maybe Facebook, find a community page. I don't know
Oh
if you
yeah.
have a Next. Do you have a Nextdoor? Nextdoor is another like actual community social network specifically for
Mhm.
communicating about neighborhood activities. Um,
Uh,
Maybe post some flyers.
yeah.
Put the word out there, and you might actually get some interest. You never know.
I don't know what I'd do without the Newfoundland Facebook group, which is the entire island, and it's got a fair bit of people. It's just,
See, there you go. There you
it's
go.
I mean, I've shared posts there, trying to find out like certain things about like certain people, like people I'm related to, stuff like that. I've had posts in there, and I mean, they've done well. I post stuff, and you either do really really well or really really bad because no one on this island makes their minds up on anything. But
Yeah, so there you go. That's what I would do. I would post there. See, I'm hopeful for you, Mason. See,
thank
just
you.
got to get out and do it.
There's got to be
Um,
someone.
there does. I absolutely. I'm
Yeah,
confident there are. So the island cannot be a total loss.
it can't be. Got to be at least a few people.
Okay, well, everyone, we're coming up on 3 hours, and I hunger. I haven't eaten yet today, so it's almost 1 p.m. my time. Okay, are there any final questions, anyone? Any final questions about medieval history, about Mason or myself, about what I'm doing, what Mason's doing, although he's mostly just chatting with me right now, but maybe next time he'll have a
Oh
project
yeah.
maybe he can work on.
Hopefully, I'm gonna
Yeah.
try and find something that I can do, and even if it's something basic, something to talk about that can get us another conversation that will lead us to
Other conversations.
the,
Yes.
the depths of the depths of history.
Exactly. Okay, well, while I give you all a chance to ask your final questions, I would like to thank my channel members and my patrons and my Facebook subscribers for financially supporting my living history research work and making it possible for me to share it with you all in this manner. If you're interested in access to extra content, extra footage, extra tutorials, access to my Creative Contessa Discord server, then consider becoming a patron, channel member, or Facebook subscriber and join in the party. I'd like to thank all of you who left super chats or gave those fun little gems today. And I would like to thank Mason for joining me again. It's been a while. I've missed our
It has.
conversations.
I have too. It was kind of weird after a while, just not being able to talk and have the community that you have to talk to about all kinds of historical things, and it's nice to finally be back for a stream.
It is. It is. We've unfortunately our community has suffered a major loss in the interim. I don't know if you remember Takeda.
Yes, I saw.
Yeah,
I saw your
but
posts.
I still can't believe it. And unfortunately, I probably never
I
really
know.
will because I I wasn't able to go to his funeral 13 time zones away. So it will never be really real for me. Takeda will always be there for me, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. If you've been enjoying this, don't forget to double tap that screen and subscribe and notification bell, guys. You have to check your
Yes,
notification bells if you want. YouTube keeps resetting them for everyone.
it does. It
So
does.
you have to click the notification bell. And if you really want to actually be notified, whenever I go live, you have to click on all. If you hit personalize, the algorithm will do the thinking for you. And I can almost guarantee you the algorithm will be wrong.
It will.
So, okay, everyone, until, tomorrow, I'm going to do my medieval cooking party tomorrow. We're going to be making 15th century Neapolitan keto ravioli. These are doughless ravioli.
Huh.
So they're they're great for all of you trying to get your macros up on the protein side and the fat side and down on the carb side. They are super delicious. I tried them last week. We're going to make them together tomorrow because I'm right now my stomach's like, ooh, yes, ravioli bianchi, feed me, because it's great to make up in large batches and keep in your fridge every time you want a nice chewy, cheesy snack. So yeah, if you're interested in medieval cookery, then tune in tomorrow. It'll be same time as today's party started. So that'll be 9 p.m. New York City time, 3 a.m. Central Europe, and 10 a.m. Seoul Standard Time. Okay, everyone. Thank you all so much for being part of the community. Until next time, may your adventures in history